With the Butt Kicker Gamer 2, what you see and what you hear is what you feel. Butt Kicker. The future is feeling.
Back in the PRL for 2025, and the GT3 Fix Series is back to warm us up on these cold mid-winter Tuesday nights. We'll have the Sprint Series coming up in a little bit later, but our initial focus here at Long Beach in California will be the GT3 Fix Series for the first time this year. Delighted to have your company here on RaceSpotTV. My name is Darren Thacker. Joining me in the commentary booth once again is Ron Moores. We've got Hugo Luis up in the broadcast booth making a wonderful broadcast for us this evening. Ron, welcome along. GT3 night, first time in 2025, and what a track to go racing at. Very different scenes to where we were at yesterday in the LMP3 GT4 Challenge, but definitely going to be an interesting way to kick off the new year.
It's going to be another intriguing race to kick off the year of 2025. I like the point you raised there a couple of moments ago in terms of the stark contrast of Watkins Glen with the LMP3s and GT4s just one evening ago. Now here to Long Beach. You can't get two separate, like two completely different racetracks that are both in America if you try. But Long Beach, kind of similar to Watkins Glen in the sense as an absolutely historic and wonderful racetrack to drive around. Originally started off in the iRacing platform as a tech track, but ever since then, iRacing and the wonderful team worked all the graphics to make this wonderful facility and kick off what's going to be a pretty darn good schedule.
Yeah, I mean, looking down this, the likes of Daytona again next week. It'll be Daytona season, won't it, in the next couple of weeks? Jerez, Suzuka. Even looking down the order towards Mount Panorama and Hockenheim at the end of the season. Mount Panorama could be a really interesting way to get towards the end of that season, because coming over the mountain, points are going to be critical, but the margins are going to be very fine.
Mount Panorama, that is going to be a rather terrifying race for some of these drivers, as if Long Beach kicking the season off isn't going to be the same kennel of fish. Both those tracks, two tracks that are technically street circuits, but still absolutely wonderful circuits that we're going to be visiting all season long here from the GT3 Fixed and Sprint Series. Some awesome races to look forward to, and what a way to kick it off. Long Beach going to host a really exciting race, and still in the qualifying session right now, and really looking forward to it here, Dara.
Yeah, me too. And of course, the first week of March will be finals week, and looking forward to seeing who we have in contention a bit when we get to that point. Before we get going into the qualifying, we have to thank our sponsors who make these broadcasts on RaceSpotTV possible, starting with Logitech. Logitech G wheels and pedals are equipped with true force feedback to help you feel the road and own the race. Use code PRECISION5 at checkout on logitechg.com, 5% off of your purchase. Advanced Sim Racing, owned and operated by passionate sim racers, Advanced Sim Racing designs and builds the sturdiest and most durable aluminium profile racing simulation cockpits available in the market today. All PRL members also get a 5% discount on ASR products using the Precision5 coupon code. Racebox offers mid and high-end button boxes for sim racing enthusiasts, from the casual gamer up to the most meticulous sim racing driver. Competitively priced and carefully handcrafted, our button boxes are an enjoyable addition to any sim racing setup. Visit raceboxsimracing.com and get a 5% discount using the Precision5 coupon code. Butt Kicker products add incredible immersion and realism to every single game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself into the driver's seat with Butt Kicker. Moradness is a performance lifestyle brand motivated by motorsport and founded by professional race car driver Daniel Morad. It's a headline racing photography. Capture your finest, proudest or simply worst moments from your hobby in up to 8K resolution. It is of course a great addition to any sim room. And Advanced Motorsports. Get ready to learn to be fast with Advanced Motorsports. Follow them on all of their socials to become a better driver. And we thank all of our sponsors who make these 5 broadcasts a week possible here on RaceSpotTV. And we can now look ahead to qualifying. Still a little while on the clock, 8 minutes still in front of us, and a lot of action down on the circuit here on. But clearly, Brett Thurman having an early advantage. Not going to split the top 2 though.
Yeah, practically nothing between the two drivers that find themselves on the front row at the moment. David Busch, the third, running in second at the moment in the 32 car, currently running down pit lane, so still has some time to try and make hay while the sun is still shining around this racetrack. But 7 minutes in a qualifying session around Long Beach, even though the lap time certainly shorter than what we saw in the PRL race yesterday here on RaceSpotTV, that's still not a whole lot of time for the simple sake that dealing with traffic and trying to find a good bit of real estate to be able to stretch your legs out fully in these race cars is going to be difficult. It's very hard to find something like that around a racetrack as tight, technical, and twisty as this one.
And the first time we've been here at Long Beach in the GT3s since January of 2023, so we've been a little while away from here, but it's great to be back, and it's a really, really enthralling way to kick off a brand new season. So delighted that we are able to see some racing around here. Dale Pedersen is trying to improve on his lap time, keeping it as close to the walls as he dared. P7 is where he currently sits in the number 6. A couple of tenths could put him right up the order, even further now with Tyler Graf just about pipping him to P7. We'll see what Pedersen can do into the final couple of corners. Of course, this hairpin to close out the lap, such a difficult corner to get right, and we often see so many close moments in the race. A few seconds, but it can always be dangerous down there, can't it?
That, I have seen that corner, whether it be in real-life IndyCar and IMSA races. I've seen that corner get turned into a parking lot. In the sim as well, I've seen that. I'll tell you what, I'll share a little bit of a story from my sim racing experience. I used to work in race control for a series that ran multi-class sports car racing, and one of the races that will always sit in my mind as the biggest oh my god race when the checkered flag finally came out was a race at this very track. So, no, it's going to be a good race, do not get me wrong. Long Beach puts on instant classics. That's part of the reason why this street circuit is still known as one of the greatest in the world and greatest in racing history, but it can lead to some chaos here and there. These drivers are going to give us a really good show, but they're also going to be walking around on eggshells in the race we have coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be so difficult to necessarily pick your right lines through here and avoid some of the other cars on the circuit. So many cars frequenting the track. 51, in fact, tonight. All of them are going to be clambering over some of these positions, particularly in that midfield. There's going to be absolutely no room for error. If we get a couple of little mistakes at the front of the field coming down into the fountain on the opening lap, that could really back things up. Similarly said, as you mentioned, at the final corner. So definitely going to want to keep a really keen eye on, but for the time being we can focus on what these drivers can do at the end of this session. Interestingly enough to see Nick Bruno up in P12 in the 222 in the AMB category, leading that category for the time being. Jared Deploy is 15th, but not too far back in terms of the time, only got a 10th or so that could be a really interesting category to keep an eye out for. But also good to see that we have got the likes of David Busch III, Felix Felice, Jared Keane, all back in this series, and Brett Thurman, of course, back to the series and right at the sharp end. So it's always nice to see, after Christmas and the New Year, drivers getting back into the rhythm of things and really picking up where they left off, isn't it?
And one driver looking to try and pick up a good result to kick this season off is certainly David Busch III, finding himself in second still, but we've got a little bit of time left in this qualifying session to see if the man behind the wheel of the number 32 Audi can jump his way up onto the pole. That is practically no time around a racetrack like this, even though the lap times are 1 minute and 18 seconds. 0.037 of a second around a racetrack that's 1.9 miles long. You could pretty much gain that time by just going probably about 6 inches closer to an apex in one single corner around this track. So David Busch III certainly has the ample opportunity, so to speak, to try and get the job done to slip his way up into the pole in front of Brett Thurman in that number 69 car. But that sort of stuff, it's a lot easier said than done. So we'll have to wait and see if he can pull it off in the final 3 minutes.
David Busch III, if memory serves, final race of the season last year. He really did put on a bit of a show, got a pole position and got the win over at Sebring. It was his only top 5 of the season, so really impressive to see that right at the end of the year. But, you know, he's therefore, you could say, the reigning race winner looking back towards the back end of last season. So definitely a driver that we're going to have to look out for. Brett Thurman last season didn't have any poles at all, so he's looking for his first in quite a long time. Felix Felice, another driver who has been around quite a while in the PRL and has his name on a couple of the record lists. So we'll have to see how this top 3 can sort itself out in the closing couple of minutes of this qualifying session. Colin McKenzie is going to try and improve on his P21, but he's not going to go too far up the order. We'll keep an eye on his closing laps in the session. But Sully Sad is also coming around what is turn 8, coming underneath the multiple bridges that make up this run towards turn 9, and then you're really focusing on that final corner now, aren't you?
Yeah, that final corner, that hairpin is really, really tricky. But I gotta say, from my personal experience running around this racetrack, Dara, that long, seemingly never-ending left-hander sweep is always a tough corner as well, especially in these big, bulky GT3 race cars, trying to carry as much speed as you can and try not to hit the marbles on the outside. Otherwise, you're going to be taking a one-way trip on the slip and slide into that outside barrier. Really tough to manage that corner heading into the hairpin, which I think makes the hairpin even more tricky, trying to get lined up through the braking zone, scrub off the speed, dropping the anchors through the concrete, leading your way off into that final turn. Just complete some of the character around this version of Long Beach, which hasn't been around for too long, Dare. You think, okay, Long Beach, it's been around many moons. I believe it was first introduced all the way back in the 70s, I believe, hosted Formula One back in the 80s, then became a staple of the IndyCar season schedule. But this layout that we're running at the moment hasn't been around for terribly long. It's certainly the oldest running layout of Long Beach, but somehow, despite not being around for a terribly long period of time, it is an absolutely iconic race circuit still.
Yeah, and of course, you cannot forget Formula E as well, Ron. Of course, that's maybe even the most important of all the series that have been here to Long Beach. But it has
say that was a straight face, could you?
Well, I tried. I did really try. But it really has been a circuit that has highlighted some of the top series in World Motorsport, and it is great to see that we are here once again in the PRL. Time really ticking down, though, as we get towards the 30-second mark. Times have to be set now if drivers want them to count. David Busch is looking to try and go fast in his Audis. Ricardo Delgado chucks it up to P3 right at the end of the session. Impressive lap there from Delgado, but can Busch offset Brett Thurman at the top of the order in his Audi? One more corner to go. Is he going to be able to get the lap in? Let's see, as the time is about to hit 0. He should be able to come across the line and finish the lap he's currently on. Needs a couple of tenths of an improvement. He's a quarter of a second, in fact, and as Barney waves the flag, he sets a 19 flat, and I'm not sure if that's going to be enough for David Busch. In fact, it's not going to, so he will stay down in P2. It looks like Brett Thurman is set forward. A couple more laps, I think, still to be set, though.
Yeah, a couple of more drivers left to cross the line, but looks like the battle for the pole is going to be set in stone unless this man, Felix Feliz, in the number 10, will be able to get a great lap time on the board in that number 10 Porsche. Nope, as I say that, he ducks down into pit lane, so that's going to do it for the driver qualified in 4th at the moment. Trying to see if there's any other drivers looking to pull off a last-second upset in this qualifying session. Not sure how many are still out there on the track, so I think that that will just about do it. Tyler Graff, though, jumping up to 6th in front of Jason Park. But Brett Thurman in that number 69 car doing everything he needed to do to grab the pole and even improving on that time in the process.
Yeah, and Dupoy actually grabbing the pole in the AM category right at the end of the session there. Some impressive stuff in the 2-2-1. He's just about overtaken Nick Bruno. Well, yeah, he's got a few positions now, but just about getting the lap time in to knock off Nick Bruno from what was going to be AM category pole position. But everybody now just about crossing the line to end this qualifying session here at Long Beach. And first qualifying session of the season, Brett Thurman is going to take the first qualifying pole of the season, and really impressive to see from him after not getting any pole positions in the entirety of 2024's season 4 to come into the start of 2025 and get a pole really is going to be a good way to start the year. And he got 3 top 5s last season out of the 9 races. He's looking to get it 1 from 1 to kick off the year. But looking forward to seeing how this race is going to develop. But it's going to get busy on the circuit, isn't it, Ron? 51 cars going around Long Beach is no mean feat, especially when they're all in the same class, because it means that we're going to see these tight battles, particularly in that midfield, all the way through the session.
Yeah, the midfield come time for this race is going to be incredibly entertaining to watch. Certainly maybe going to be entertaining in the more so terrified for your life aspect if you're one of the drivers behind the wheel, but nevertheless going to be a really fun way to kick this season off. Right on board with Brett Thurman and taking a look at his pole time to see what he did around this racetrack, the wizardry, taking a whole lot of that inside curb through turn number 1. You can see that run through the fountain, full commitment, carrying as much speed as you possibly can in this Porsche to try and grab the pole. And look at that. I think one of the main keys for him to be able to set the time that he did, not having to worry about traffic. We mentioned it in that qualifying session, Dara, how important it is to be able to have some real estate around this circuit and get a good lap time on the board without any more drivers in your hair. I think this is part of the reason why Brett Thurman was able to set in this cooker of a lap time that he did.
Yeah, we see a lot of the drivers getting more stuck in the traffic as there's really difficult to find a bit of a gap with so many cars circulating the racetrack, but Brett doing a very good job in finding a sweet zone to get this fastest lap time. In second pole for Brett Thurman in the PRL. He's been a driver that's been heavily consistent in getting his top 5 finishes, but not necessarily always getting that fastest lap done in qualifying. So really, really good way. And I'm sure Brett's going to be absolutely thrilled with how his season has begun, and that was his lap to start us off here in California. We'll have to see if he can replicate that kind of success in the race. Of course, Deploy got the pole in the AM category. We'll have to see what he can do from the starting in the teens. Of course, the AMs and the pros mixed all in together, so the AMs really are fighting for not as many points, but points all the same, which means it could get even more significant towards the end of the season when it comes to the championship battle. So that's something to watch out for. 3 minutes left in warm-up. Drivers getting used to maybe a little bit of heavier fuel loads. And how important do you think this is for the drivers, Ron? Because we sometimes see in some sessions drivers don't really use the warm-up session, but do you think it's a really useful tool for the drivers to kind of get their heads into race mode?
I feel like for any sort of street race, having a lot of practice time is really, really important, because you could do many laps around a track like Watkins Glen, for instance, and you'll eventually find your markers. You'll find exactly where your comfort zone is. A street circuit, on the other hand, you want to be absolutely 100% positively sure about how you can get around this racetrack, because if there's any sort of doubt in your mind, it's going to end in tears. You need to be confident every single time you get on the brakes, every single time you turn into the corners. And even though with traction control it's not really too much of a worry in these GT3 cars, worrying about when you get on the throttle coming out of these corners as well, you have to have that 100% bona fide confidence whenever you turn a lap around this racetrack. So I think that could be part of the reason why we're seeing some more drivers hit the track in this warm-up session, because around a street circuit, regardless of where it may be, could be Monaco, could be Long Beach, could be whatever, you want to have that added confidence before you take the green flag.
Yeah, always want to have as much backing of yourself as is possible, and these drivers will be trying to focus in on that. Robert Jeffries there. Nice to see a few of the drivers with some new liveries on the cars, kind of kicking off the new scene. Ian Cabana, one of those, and he's got a lovely little logo on the front of that car, right on the hood. And aptly named, I think, Crikey Esports. I think if there's any kind of incident, we're going to have to be referencing that throughout the season. Lots of other drivers keeping it the same. Actually, Tyler Graf with a very similar, if not exactly the same paint scheme in his Mad Works entry. Tyler Graf caught up in one of those big incidents in 2024. We'll have to that was at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. It wasn't necessarily his fault, but you can get big pile-ups, and he was part of it. We'll see if that happens again. I think Tyler maybe seeing himself on the screen there, having a great time. It seems, and it's always nice to see some of the driver cams that we have on, because everyone's got their own setup, and it's always nice to see how the drivers get comfortable for their racing.
Yeah, always nice to see the decorations as well that they have in the back of shots. So always good to take a look at and see what these drivers have as their sim rig setup. I gotta say, certainly 1,000 times better than the sim rig setup that I've got at the moment, because that thing is about as rough as you could possibly get. The current sim rig that I have at the moment, my dad got for me back in 2018. So that thing has seen many laps around many separate racetracks. These drivers putting my sim setup to absolute shame. Always good to take a look at that. Nice to see the drivers behind the wheel. You know, usually in the sim racing world, you just think of names to cars. It's nice to put some names to faces as well and see these drivers who are going to tackle this race we have coming up.
And strap yourselves in, folks, at home, because this is going to be quite a long grid to run through, because we have a lot of people here tonight. The field will be led to green by the number 69 of Brett Thurman. His 1:18.6 was enough to get himself poled by a good quarter of a second ahead of David Bush. Ricardo Delgado, I should say, will start in P3 with Felix Feliz lining up alongside him on row number 2. It's Jared Keane and Tyler Graf on row 3. 2,000ths to split those guys for a little bit of a gap back to Jason Park, who will start 7th. Dale Pedersen, Jay Steffi and Richard Saavedra round out our top 10, with Matt Scherf in 11th. Jared Deploy is the leader in the AM category. He's 12th, with Andrew Ellis and Andrew Trickett in row 7. Nick Bruno and Solly Sad, Herbert Pineda and Colin McKenzie make up rows 8 and rows 9, with the top 20 rounded out by Joel Peguero and Andrew Vernaro. It's Pete Medria and Ryan Chandler inside the top 22, with Reagan Chandler and Sam Smeltzer in 23rd and 24th. Buck Hamilton is alongside Dave Peterson. Clarence Roser is alongside Thomas Rep, and running out the top 30, we've got Alexandra Potvin and Evander Josenfield. Luis Ortiz and Aaron Sunday on row 16, with Ian Southern and Seb Gauthier on 33rd and 34th. We've got Nikos Sanidakis and David Morse, who make up row 18, and they just keep rolling on. Dave Jensen and Luke Davis, Sean Stecker and Ian Cabana inside our top 40, with Neil Alexander and Kevin Bergqvist inside the top 42. Just now 2 seconds off the pole time, with Robert Jeffries and Waldo Walden in 43rd and 44th. Sean Duhamel in 45th, with Mark Bray in 46th. Row 24 is Matthew Harms and Sean Mulholland, with the grid rounded out by the back 3. Mark Sickelkow, Drew DeVess and Christopher Rhines. 51 cars that are here for the fixed series at Long Beach, and we don't have too long to find out how this start's going to go, Ron.
This start, it's going to be maybe the most important one all season long, and maybe the most terrifying one as well. That run heading off into turn number 1, certainly going to be something these drivers have to think a whole lot about. And even the start as well, you can see heading through that final hairpin, that's going to be tricky for the drivers in the back of the field, but ready to grab the green in a couple of moments time here, Dara.
Yeah, and we're about to get going. It's going to be green flag racing. This is one of the most experienced GT3 grid, if not the most experienced GT3 grid we've ever had in the fixed series here in the PRL. We're about to get going for a brand new season, and the green flag drops, and we are away here in California to kick off 2025. It's a good start from our leading duo, but it's going to get a little bit messy in behind. Tyler Graf, one of those cars in that very distinctive livery, who's trying to make his way up the order. Into the opening braking zone that we come, it's going to be David Bush trying to fend off into turn 2 for his P2. It's Ricardo Delgado and Felix Feliz fighting it out through the fountain section. Tyler Graf trying to get involved as well. Oh no! And a spin into the fountain section. The first little moment that we've seen, a front end missing, but not the kind of pileup we were dreading.
Yeah, not the pile-up that we were maybe expecting at the very start of this race, but still not good either. You can see spinning and towing back to pit lane. But the one thing that was catching my attention there, Daryl, was the fact that Ricardo Delgado, it looks like he's completely lost his front bumper. It was a little bit of contact coming out of the fan section. I'm not sure if there's some sort of like weird graphical error going on or what, but that front bumper, it looked like it popped off like a misshapen Lego, and it's not popping back onto that car. So Delgado already having some major damage before we even complete the first few corners of the race.
Yeah, I think that may be a little bit more visual than it is effective. He's clearly not losing too much time with having a GT3 car that looks a little bit worse for wear. They'll all fly their way through towards the final corner. Now, the single file nature kind of helps us not have too many incidents on the opening lap, which has somewhat been a bit of a saving grace. A couple of drivers ducking down into pit lane, though, after having a couple of issues, and here they come through the final corner. This is still the midfield, mind you, with the leaders down towards the fountain section. They all fly through. You can see the positions in their windscreen. So this really is midfield, 27th, 28th, 29th in the 51 car field. So 2, 3 wide towards the back. This really is going to be a busy old race, isn't it?
Yeah, it is going to be hectic for these drivers. Gotta say, Dara, I'm not sure about you, but I'm very happy that we're in the commentary booth instead of out there on the racetrack. It'd be like sharing this commentary booth with a pack of bees, but these racers still side by side, battling as hard as they can and making up some moves as the field is as close as it is still. You want to try and get some positions gained, as we nearly just saw a moment involving Ian Southern heading through the fountain section. He may try and get a move put on him, as there's another car going off and pulling over to the side of the track.
It was another driver towing back to pit lane. Not too sure who that was specifically. It could have been Jason Park, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. It is fair to say that Jason Park's not had a good start. I believe he is in pit lane after starting all the way up in P12. So not been the best of starts for him, but let's see if he can recover over the course of the remaining 32 minutes. Reagan Chandler, part of this battle as we run our way in towards the final couple of corners. This is at the back end of the top 20. In fact, Reagan Chandler is in P20, looking to try and improve the P19 as we work our way across the start-finish line for the second time. I did want to mention actually that we have the 51 drivers, but even starting at the back of the field is nothing to be ashamed about, as we do see the incident with Tyler Graff down at the fountain section, and this will be his little spin at the following corner. You can see the rear end just going around, and that's him then towing back to pit lane. But the driver who lined up 51st and last in qualify is the most experienced GT3 driver in the PRL. Christopher Rhines is in his 137th GT3 start in the PRL tonight. Let's see what he can do from the back of the field. Sam Smeltzer was part of the concertina effect in the car park down there at the final turn. I wonder if anybody's trying to get themselves parked for work. Of course, it is just, I think, at the end of rush hour over there on the west coast of the USA. It's about to get to 6 p.m. Pacific time, so I think you could still call that rush hour, can't you?
Yeah, I would say so. In some big cities around this country, that will definitely be rush hour. Certainly don't want to be stuck in a traffic jam at any time in any major city in this country. But nevertheless, these drivers having to deal with the traffic. And look at that. That, I believe, was even before he grabbed the green. And that was the sort of stuff that I was expecting. Usually you see a bit of a concertina effect, and you can see the game of ping pong going on towards the back of the pack at that initial start. That was the thing that I was expecting, though, Dara, right before he grabbed the green, heading through the hairpin. It's happened in real life. It happens in the sim as well. That stack up heading through the hairpin. It is such a tough corner to try and get right with that, and getting major damage on that car as we see a spin and big amount of drama involving Clarence Rosen in the 98.
Yeah, pulling off the side road. That was the car that we saw parked off. It wasn't, in fact, who I said it was, which was Jason Park. It was Clarence Rosa going off in the number 98, which is who we saw tow back to pit lane from the inside there, down at turn number 5. We'll look back to the leader, though, Brett Thurman, as he continues to try and stretch his margin at the front. 1.8, 1.7 seconds to David Bush for the time being. It looks relatively comfortable from where we sit. Going to be difficult to really make some overtakes when the pace is similar here at Long Beach. So I think Brett Thurman will be pretty pleased about how it is going off of the start. Shout out as well to Colin McKenzie for leading the way in the AM category, but clearly quite a good battle ongoing there with the top 4 nose to tail line of stern in the AM category, and here they are. Quick couple of shout outs to give as well in terms of the position changes early on. Dave Jensen started in P37. He's up 11 places overall, and for Mark Sigelkow, I should say, started P49. He's up 12, and they're the biggest movers so far.
Now, lots of drivers cutting their way through the field like a hot knife through butter very early on. Still early doors into this race. Only about 6 minutes on the board and a whole lot of action baked into the start of this race already. We've had some incidents here and there, some passes for position, and some drivers absolutely scything their way through the field. But one thing that we have seen is Brett Thurman checking out 1.7 seconds. I was going to say 1.5, but 1.7 seconds between himself and David Busch between P1 and P2.
Yeah, let's see if David Busch can keep this gap relatively close. He's been setting some very fast lap times, mind you, which is why he has the fastest lap time of the race. It's an 18.993, the only driver to have dug into the 1 minute 18s in the race so far. Best lap time from Brett Thurman was a 19.1. The difference on the last lap was in change, about a tenth and a half. So not big changes, but it's coming down all the same. Ricardo Delgado trying to follow David Busch the third and keep himself in contention. But there's still these battles going on in the midfield as we expected. Ian Sutherland caught up right in the midst of it for P27. He is just behind Dave Jensen and Seb Gauthier, with Aaron Sunday just in behind him. So a tight little battle ongoing. Inside line though, down in towards one of the penultimate corners at turn 9, and we'll get that move done. Outside line now though for the 3-3-1. Dave Jensen under all kinds of pressure as we run to the final corner, and that's going to be Aaron Sunday looking up the inside and getting that move done no matter how slow, and he'll get up into P28 now.
Yeah, you could see that game of bumper cars heading through the hairpin. The amount of times we're going to be mentioning that throughout this broadcast will beggar belief, but it really speaks volumes about the way that corner is and how it rears its head in all sorts of races around here. But side-by-side fighting, heading down into turn number 1, a contact being made through the braking zone of that first corner. That could have ended in disaster, but all it results in is now single filing out, heading through the fountain section, but that could have ended in disaster, Dara.
Good, but luckily we avoided too much of a heavy collision, and we will continue on with these guys in the battle at the back end of the top 30. Could have been worse than it was, so we're thankful for that, but either way, drivers still not going to be happy about little moments of contact. We'll work our way through at turn number 6 and 7. Of course, that left-hander almost counting as 2 corners officially. It's really just one big sweeping left-hand bend, of course, but then you get to turn 8, and then you get towards the one of the main overtaking spots on the racetrack, is fair to say, down at turn 9, but Aaron Sunday is not going to get anywhere in a month of Sundays down there being that far back, so he will stay down in P28. I think drivers settling in now to this race, nearly 10 minutes in. Again, with the nature of the Long Beach circuit, we're not going to see too many moves without little moments of contact or little moments to create the opportunities for the drivers, but it's nice to see that I think the drivers are starting to get themselves into a rhythm after that frantic opening couple of laps.
Yeah, they're finally getting into a zone, which around a racetrack like this, I feel takes a little bit longer than a normal open road course with a whole lot of runoff area. You feel a bit more tense running around a racetrack like this. You don't have any runoff area to speak of. You make a mistake at a track like Watkins Glen, for instance. Okay, you hit the curb, got a little bit of grass or gravel or some dust on your tires. Really no harm, no foul unless you make contact with another car. Here, on the other hand, you make a small little mistake, bang, you got a concrete wall that's going to meet you. So these racers may be having to take a lot more time to get into the groove, get into the zone, and switch their minds into a mode to just whittle those laps away. Feels like that's a bit more of an ask around a street circuit.
Absolutely, but these drivers are going to be up to it, I have no doubt, and they will continue to battle. Aaron Sunday trying to find his way back down the inside, down at turn 9. He's persisting if he can. Oh no! A little bit of contact as they make their way into the corner. That'll be even more contact and that's going to be a very difficult spot on the circuit for us to try and sort that one out. Aaron Sunday went for the move, but it didn't quite work out, and everybody now having to pick their way through 3 wide at turn 10. I don't think I've ever seen that work out before, and the little bit of contact shows you that it's not going to work out this time either, as they work their way through the final turn. Oh, more contact, a couple of blinking drivers, and that's going to be into the final corner. They're off the racing line though, and drivers should be able to go either side, but that is a couple of scary moments there.
Yeah, a couple of incidents in the span of just a couple of corners, and here's some replays. It all started with this moment. David Jensen in that, and more contact being made. You can see, and coming in, multiple cars piling into that. A standard Long Beach affair as Jensen in that 692 car was stopped with absolutely nowhere to run or hide. And there's another moment involving Ian Cabana in that 774 car. You can see him side by side with the 44 coming out of the corner. I think the 44 may have come off the wall a little bit as Cabana was trying to exit out of the hairpin. So just 2 cars fighting for the same piece of real estate in the span of a couple of moments, and multiple collisions taking place as a result.
Yeah, and lucky, I think, for a few of the drivers to pick their way through. That was a very difficult incident to try and negotiate. So, I know what we expected right at the start of the race. It's almost been a surprise that we've got about 12 minutes into the race before we've seen anything like that down at turn 9, but that's a happy surprise, no doubt about that. In towards turn 5 we will go with Andrew Ellis, and this will be Jay Steffi in the battle for P8 and P9. And nice to see these guys inside the top 10 having their own little battle. Of course, they've got a bit of a gap back to Andrew Trickett of 2.5 seconds or so, so feeling a little bit safe in the positions that they're currently in. I think they'd like to try and get after the likes of Matt Scherf, who is currently in P7. Mind you, Matt Scherf, a race winner in the GT3s here in the PRL at Long Beach, so definitely not a driver that is to be messed with at this circuit, but we'll have to see if he is able to kind of replicate the same thing. Mind you, I'm going to correct myself, he's not a race winner, he's a pole sitter here, looking at the wrong column, that's my bad, but clearly has the pace of this circuit and has shown it in the past. So for the time being, Ellis and Steffi fighting their own battle, but they've got to be a little bit wary of trying to catch up to P7 here.
Yeah, if they start to battle, they could probably discount ever catching up to Sheriff in that number 43 car, but Ellis and Steffi certainly going to give us an intriguing fight. However, if those two decide to work together as pseudo teammates, and these two who are following right now, Dale Peterson, the number 6, and Matt Sheriff, who are riding on board with in the 43, decide to start to battle, that could bring those two involved into this fight. It's a big gap for Andrew Ellis in that number 17 car to try and surmount, but 2-second gap with over 22 minutes left to go into this race. That's not an impossible gap to close down. And you can also see a little bit farther up the road the 999 car of Richard Saavedra. So this may be a 3-car fight, and this could turn into a 5-car fight if they're not really careful about what they do.
Yeah, and they're going to have to be wary of the drivers in behind and know that they're not a million miles away if they start to fight. So definitely thoughts to be had towards the front end of this train in the order, but they will continue on through the final corner, showing some very good pace at the moment. We're seeing the front 3 at the moment lapping about 19.6, 19.7. Felix Felice joining them on that mark, but I think this train for P5 is generally lapping around that 1 minute 19, 1 minute 20 flat mark, so that'll be interesting. Andrew Ellis on that last lap, 0.3 quicker than Matt in the number 43. That gap still at 2.4 seconds, but maybe a sign of things to come if it starts to come down.
Potentially, but one thing that may disrupt this a little bit is the fact there's a lapped car that just came out the pits a couple of moments ago in front of these drivers. Gonna look to try and figure out who that is in that Ferrari that may be acting as a little bit of a rolling roadblock for the time being. Looks like they're going to get out of these racers' way, heading down into the next corner, but losing out on a little bit of time through the fan section in the opening sector of this lap. It looks like that's broken up that fight between Saavedra and Peterson a little bit, as we're back up and see Delgado now involved in a battle with a lap. Actually, no, my apologies. That's not with a lap car. That's David Bush the third. So these two battling on the final 2 podium spots as Thurman still continues to check out. Now 2.5 seconds in front of Bush.
Yeah, and Thurman really has been impressive in this race, pulling away. He's, again, not a driver with a million wins to his name. Very consistent in terms of being top 5 runner here in the PRL, and has been one of those drivers to get one of the most top 5s, I believe, in PRL's history. I have to get back to you on the exact numbers on that, but Brett Thurman, always one of those up near the sharp end, and I think he'll be delighted to be kicking off the year in the manner that he is. So great to see. We'll see if he can keep this one up as we run our way towards half distance in this race. Andrew Trickett finding it a little bit tricky to get himself back going again after spinning into the wall, but he just about does, and will be now in P11 in front of this train, which includes the leading AM drivers.
Now, we haven't really talked about the AM class too much, but there is a mega battle going on between Nick Bruno in the 222, Colin McKenzie in the 15, and you got Joel in the 31 who are following right now. That Corvette running third of the AM drivers, 14th overall. All of those cars covered by practically nothing, so Nick Bruno has got to be feeling a world of pressure, leading and big contact being made. That going for a spin is Drew Ducey in the number 23 Mustang, gets it spun around the right direction, dropping down to 38th. I believe he was a lapped car involved in that drama a couple of moments ago, but still not what these drivers leading in the AM category probably want to see heading through a corner either.
Yeah, definitely not. It's a difficult point of the circuit, but I think at this stage of the race, particularly as we get to the halfway point, I don't really want to be getting caught up in too many of these little incidents, and that is Judavest going around. And yeah, I think he'll say that he left enough space on the inside, and he got tagged around. Of course, that'll be sorted out post-race. We'll update you if anything comes of that next week. But that is for 7 days' time. In the meantime, though, we've still got this battle for P2 in the overall standings, and of course in the Pro, between David Bush and Richard Delgado. Delgado really on the tail now of David Bush, but missing the front end cosmetically. I don't think it's really affected him in terms of his pace, though.
Yeah, it seems like it hasn't hurt him too much. However, it should be noted the fact he spent a decent chunk of this race in the coattails and in the draft of David Bush III. I'm curious if he pulls out of line going down one of the straightaways around this racetrack and tries to get moved on that number 3 car. Will we finally see that damage maybe play a role? Because that's a pretty significant piece missing, as never mind David Bush making a run to come down pit lane. So that's a very early call to come into the pits, coming in nearly 17 and a half minutes in that Audi. Is this a pit stop possibly, or is this possibly a penalty of some sorts? Looking through, still not stopping, but Bush down pit lane.
It's a very long way, isn't it, down there, all the way to the end of the pit lane where he will find his box. Interesting, I think, that he's gone this early. I think if I was towards the front of the field, I'd kind of wait for the rest of the pack to come into the pit lane to avoid getting myself into too much traffic. But David Bush has gone for it early. He'll hope that he won't be called a lunatic after the strategy, as the side of his car and his team name would suggest. But the number 32 will emerge onto the circuit in that battle with some of the leading AM drivers. P16, maybe dropping down a little bit further. P19 is where he should emerge, and one of the front runners now right in the thick of it has got a lot of work to do to try and work his way through this order if these guys don't come into the pit lane in any time soon.
Imagine being Bush in this race and finding yourself in this position. Was running up towards the front, and I wouldn't say he was running by himself based off the fact he had Ricardo Delgado hounding him for that final for the final 2 positions in that podium, but from the perspective of the driver of the number 32 car, you go from a point in the race where you're running in a small little battle, but nothing major, to finding yourself just one more brick in the wall and finding yourself in a huge line of race cars in the midfield. That is not an easy place to find yourself in at all. He is hoping at this point in time not to get involved in any sort of major lap traffic or just traffic period encounters, and certainly hoping, keeping his fingers crossed and hoping for the best, that no sort of collisions happen around him that could lead to him picking up some damage.
Yeah, and that damage could be significant if he was to... Well, significant of his race, at least, if he was to pick up any into the closing stages of this one, considering that he is fighting for some very big points here this evening. Out of position, of course, after making that pit stop, but I think it will start to shake itself out over the coming minutes. We do see this battle continuing though between Dale Pedersen, Richard Saavedra even, Matt Sheriff over P4 now, was P5 before we saw the pit stop from David Bush, but the 999 promoted up into P4 and leading this little gaggle of cars as they make their way towards turn 9. As the sun starts to dip behind the Pacific Ocean here at Long Beach, I mean, mind you, the cameras that we have don't really give much of a perspective on how close we are to the Pacific Ocean, but for those of you watching along who don't know much about the location of this circuit, quite literally, from the left-hand side of this shot, you've got those palm trees, and then it's the ocean. So we really are as close as can be to the water, and the sun dipping behind those blue waters, but the drivers focusing on keeping themselves as close as they can. Doesn't really give it justice, does it? iRacing, you can just about see it, can't you, in the almost in the mist back there.
Yeah, it is a very beautiful racetrack, oh so close to the ocean. Long Beach, one of those racetracks that I certainly want to make a visit to at some point in the not too distant future. It's on the complete opposite side of the country to me, but Long Beach, a wonderful racetrack, a pretty racetrack as well. And I remember when I got introduced into iRacing, people were oh so worried about their graphics cards not having the power to try and suffice it, but thank you to Hugo producing this stream here on RaceSpot tonight. His graphics card being the absolute hero of this broadcast. The fans on, though, are probably screaming so loud Hugo's PC may start to sound like a plane taking off with the amount of stuff around here.
That's what my PC sounds like, and I'm just commentating. So yeah, credit for Hugo to getting it all sorted. Matthew Harms has come to harm, coming through turn number 5 and losing the rear wing there, maybe having to repair some of that damage as well. From that aerial shot as well, it almost looked like a ship looking like the Titanic was in the bay. I don't think you get many of those at Long Beach, but hey-ho, you've got to give it to iRacing. They've added those little details in. No one's going to go over there. You'd hope that no one finds himself over there in one of these cars, and they will hope to keep it nicely on the circuit and in contention in these races as we work our way towards the final 30 minutes. Chase Steffi has come into the box, and we'll see where he can come up, but it's going to be a very long way down, and he's only just got stopped into his box, and he's already off and out of the top 16. David Bush, it looks like he's about to start making some moves through the field. Buck Hamilton will be his next target. He's only a couple of tenths behind as he is trying to work his way back. There's the ship. That does look a little bit like the Titanic, right? I'm not going crazy.
Well, I will say it's actually the RMS Queen Mary that was operated by a British. Yeah, that is it right there. So got holed up in Long Beach. It basically serves as a hotel nowadays. So before you go into any more like maritime stories, I just want to share that. Believe me, I was a nerd in school. I still am a nerd. That's part of the reason I have the job that I do. But that is the RMS Queen Mary right there, and it's been holed up in Long Beach for many moons at this point, and serves as a nice backdrop to this race circuit.
Thank you for telling me that, because I genuinely did not know that. That's actually pretty cool that iRacing have included that into the game, even though it's that far away from the circuit. So thanks for that. That's actually a cool little fact. Maybe I'm just showing my lack of... I mean, you think you're far away over on the east coast of the USA. You think how long it would take me to fly over to Long Beach from over here in the UK. David Bush working his way through a couple of drivers. A lot of drivers now ducking themselves into pit lane. How busy is it going to get in the final 12 minutes? I think we're about to find out. But can he stay in contention with Richard Delgado, who has closed up to Brett Thurman, released from the back of David Bush? And that 2.5-3 second gap has come right down, and now well under a second.
Yeah, that gap has just about diminished. So even though he's been missing that front bumper, Delgado doing a really good job. I think this may be part of the reason why the lap traffic playing its role in this race, but never mind. These two now making their run into the pit. So let's see. This is going to be the money stop for both of these drivers with a tick over 11 minutes left on the clock. Thurman and Delgado making that run to come into the pits. Let's see who's going to jump out in front, who's going to gain that track position, but I think that traffic, Delgado playing it beautifully to close up that gap to a matter of tenths of a second rather than over 2. But oh, he just did himself no favors there overshooting his box.
Yeah, and those little mistakes can really cost you dear in races with as fine as margins as we have here. And Ricciardo will know that every little moment is going to be either a big help to him in the pit stop or a big hindrance. And as they emerge from the pit lane, it will be Brett Thurman ahead of Delgado as they make their way back onto the circuit. Where is David Busch? I'll be honest, in comparison, absolutely nowhere to be seen compared to Brett Thurman. About 5-6 seconds back from our net race leader now. Pete Megier is the car just behind Brett Thurman in the 34 at the moment, leading that AM category, but that's likely to change when Pete comes down pit road. This is Joel Peguero in that black and yellow 31 car, just trying to get out of the pit lane as quick as he possibly can to make sure that he doesn't lose too many positions. But up behind Nick Bruno, this is going to be a competitive race off of the stops, and I think that's going to be a couple of important drivers coming through, no least Colin McKenzie, who's just about got through on Joel Peguero and Nick Bruno into turn one, and that's the battles for the lead in the AM category.
Yeah, that is going to be a real important change of positions for those two racers. But one thing that just caught my mind looking at the other left-hand side of the screen with the timing tower as the front three of Felice, Saavedra, and Sheriff, along with Sully Stad, all come down pit lane here. Now under 10 minutes left to go. David Busch, who we saw one of the first drivers to make that decision to come down pit lane, that number 32 Audi has made his way back up into 9th, and he's only going to gain more spots between then and now, so it's actually worked out, I would say, okay for him, and it's actually he hasn't lost out on a terrible amount of time in all of that. Finds himself in 3rd now that all the pit stops, for lack of a better term, have been taken care of, but he's actually lost out on a little bit of time to Delgado, so it may not be all sunshine and lollipops.
That's the fastest lap though, so that will be a little, I'm sure, a little consolation to him, and still getting himself up towards the podium positions, which would be a really impressive feat. Of course, as I said, he rounded out last season in a really impressive manner, winning that race at Sebring and getting started in 2025 with what should be another podium, a big gap back to Felix Felice, who is leading this train with Richard Saavedra, Matt Sheriff, Dale Pedersen, Andrew Ellis all involved, and it's a very tightly packed train really for P5 particularly, especially when you consider there's that big gap between 4th and 3rd. This is a really close battle throughout the top 10.
Yeah, this is a real close battle that we're seeing all throughout this field, even though we have over the vast majority of this race already taken care of. The battles are still intense, and look at this. The shimmy shan heading down the back straightaway off into one of the funnel corners around this racetrack. Saavedra trying to make some moves done. Sheriff certainly feeling racy, though. Side by side still into the hairpin, but that's not going to work at all. And Sheriff overshoots it into the hairpin, and Saavedra going to get that move done to slip his way back up into 5th. Look at Dale Peterson, though, in that number 6 car. He may try and size up a move in the not too far off future, riding on board with that number 6 Ride Motorsports Acura. Will he get a move done into turn number 1, or is he just going to allow Richard Saavedra and Matt Sheriff to continue to go side by side and come to blows heading through turn number 1?
Yeah, and that'll be the 43, not having the best of times through the opening turn, and it'll be Dale Pedersen and Andrew Ellis picking up the pieces and finding themselves now into P6 and 7. Pedersen in the in P6 in the number 6. Nice bit of synergy there as they work their way through. Not for much longer though. He's up into P5. Good move to the inside at turn number 5 on Richard Saavedra, and he's dispatched of the 999 driver. Can he try and keep himself up in the top 5 in the closing stages? Less than 7 minutes to go here at Long Beach. Our timing page reckons we've still got another 6 laps. I think we're going to be hard pressed to get that, maybe 5. We may just about get a 6th, but we really are ticking down now in terms of the lap count to go here at Long Beach. And moves are going to have to be made quickly because overtaking opportunities are going to be becoming very much thin in the closing couple of laps, and it's not a circuit where you really want to be desperate for a move, because it's not a circuit where you can particularly lunge it anywhere.
Yeah, run a racetrack like this, you can't get those moves done unless you do it with absolute authority. So at this point in time, these racers may be thinking in their heads, trying to play that motorsports game of chess about when to make the moves, what moves to make, and how exactly you can tackle the final stages of this race. Around a racetrack like this too, with that amount of laps left on the board, it doesn't present a whole lot of overtaking opportunities left to go. So these racers going to have to approach to the end of this race a bit more methodical, and we're going to see some drivers perhaps take it easy. Those may be the ones that we have to talk about come time for discussing championship contenders and championship point scenarios, because those may be the ones that play it a little bit easy, play it safe, and just think about the long haul rather than the short-term gains.
I'm going to be interested to see the dynamic actually in the opening couple of rounds. Of course, with this being a street circuit, we're not going to have this same kind of venue in the next couple of weeks. Whether we see a similar pattern at the top of the field, or whether we start to see some newer drivers come towards the front and get to some circuits where their strengths lie a little bit more. So that's going to be really interesting to see. But the guys at the top of the order right now, this is a fantastic way to start the season and really gives them a confidence boost, I'm sure, going into round 2, round 3, and in towards the back end of January, where drivers are going to be trying to establish themselves at the top of the order. David Busch has caught up to the back of Ricardo Delgado. This is a bit of lap traffic helping out the number 32 driver, and all of a sudden he's gone from being about 3 seconds behind the battle for the lead to being really involved in it. 2.5 seconds off the lead. There's Brett Thurman just up the road, and David Busch is trying to get onto P2. I think the traffic definitely helping him here.
I think Brett Thurman should be very happy and possibly counting his lucky stars the fact this race is 35 minutes long instead of 45. Otherwise, he would be in a world of trouble come time for the checkered flag. Still, though, with 4 minutes left on the clock, if Ricardo Delgado and David Busch play their cards right and don't battle too hard, they may be able to slowly but surely reel in Brett Thurman with the help of a little bit of lap traffic, and maybe a mistake for the driver of that number 69 car. But these two certainly going to battle for those final 2 podium spots. They're running effectively in no man's land. You have to go back about 15 seconds to find Felix Feliz running in P4 at the moment in that number 10 car. So these two running in their own world, running in P2 and P3. And I'm sure David Busch at this point in time looking to maybe get a move done on Ricardo Delgado. Both of them have put together some really good races thus far. But one of them's going to be the runner-up, the other is going to be taking the bronze, and let's see who it's going to be.
You never know, they may be fighting for a win if something happens to Brett Thurman as well. So this is really important right at the start of the season, and big points in the offing as well. Don't worry if you're looking at the time thinking we've only got 3 more minutes worth of racing, because we've got the GT3 Sprint Series coming up after the end of this race, so you won't want to go far once we have found the checkered flag for the first time here this evening. This is Neil Alexander fighting it out for P29 in the overall standings. Of course, he's in the AM category, and he's just behind the P29 driver of Waldo Walden, who is one of the pro drivers. But Neil Alexander wouldn't mind making the move because, of course, there is no separate point system for the pros and the AMs. So wherever the AMs finish is where they'll pick up the points for. So that's definitely a very key theme to be watching out for throughout the season, that even if the AMs are fighting with a pro, they're still going to be picking up the points if they can overtake the pro drivers. So that's going to be key. You don't necessarily get different point systems as you may see in other series. Richard Saavedra is dropping down the order. What's happened to him in the 999? I saw him battling, I believe, with Andrew Ellis, but it's not gone well for Richard Saavedra, and this is what's happened. Oh, he's clipped the front end of the wall. He's gone into the other car, and Saavedra facing the wrong way. That'll be why. There's going to be some significant damage on that car, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was a pretty significant whack. There is no light bit of wall contact around a racetrack like this. I mean, concrete barrier, it's not Tempur-Pedic at all. So when you hit that, you're not going to be having a whole lot of fun. Neither is your car, for that matter, and neither are your mechanics at all. But these racers still trying to find some fun around this track as the sun is dipping down, the headlights are going up in the air. One thing that will be up in the air in the not-too-distant future, though, is going to be that white flag with only a tick over a minute and a half left to go. Not sure if Delgado and David Busch are going to have that time to reel in Brett Thurman. Thurman, as I said, probably very happy about the fact this race is a distance that it is. Otherwise, we would have a real intense fight to the finish. Still have one, though, is Delgado and David Busch. Certainly not going to give each other any sort of concessions out there on the racetrack. They're going to be battling as hard as they can for P2 and P3. May not seem like much and maybe only one position gained, but by the end of the season, all the points that you can tally up can matter, as that white flag is now in the air.
Yeah, we are on the final lap then here at Long Beach. And what a performance it's been from Brett Thurman. Really impressive to see him pull away in the last couple of laps from Ricardo Delgado, who put up a really good fight. But it has been really interesting, hasn't it, to see these front three pull away from the rest, because Felice is a long way back. Ellis is now a long way back. Something's happened to Dale Pedersen.
Oh, what has gone on with the driver of the number 6 car? We saw him involved in that intense battle involving himself, the likes of Ellis, Scherf, Sully Sad, I believe, was involved in that fight as well, along with, at one point, Felix Feliz in the number 10, but he's dropping down the running order, now falling outside the top 20. That is going to be a major amount of drama. It may have been an incident heading through turn number 1 or the found section. Either way, got to take him out of contention, but only a couple of more corners left to go for Brett Thurman in that number 69 Porsche to take the first checkered flag of the season for the Fix Series.
Yeah, and he's just got a couple more corners to negotiate. Brett Thurman, he's been here quite a lot in the PRL. This is his 217th all-time start. It's going to be his 3rd win in the PRL, and he's going to be hard-pressed to take it off him. Pole to the win, dominating the race all the way through. And Brett Thurman is your winner in the opening round here of the GT3 Fix Series for Season 1 of 2025. He leads home Ricardo Delgado and David Bush III, who round off a very competitive podium. A big gap back to Jim Felice, but then we look back to Colin McKenzie. He's looking like he's set to win the race here in the AM category, and he has been so impressive, ahead of the likes of Nick Bruno and Joel Peguero. He's been pushed all the way, but it looks like he's got one more corner to go. He'll take that AM crown.
And getting word about that moment that we saw from a driver who was incredibly good earlier on in this race, that off-track moment that we saw heading through turn number 1. I'm trying to think of the driver whose name is blanking from me. I'm going to have to look into iRacing to try and figure out exactly what went wrong there, but sort of incidents like that hang off into turn number 1. We saw it happen earlier on there. It may have happened yet again, but unfortunate for these drivers to run into some difficulties. But either way, a brilliant way to kick the season off, as there's more battles coming to the checkered flag a little bit farther outside the top 20.
Yeah, battles everywhere on the circuit. I think it's going to set us up for a very nice sprint series race that it's coming up in just a few minutes' time. There'll be 40 minutes on the clock there. Drivers with a little bit more room to play around with their setups, and it's going to be interesting to see how they can adapt. But here are the results then from the opening round of the GT3 Fix Series in 2025, and it was Brett Thurman who has got the year off to the best possible start with a win, and he leads home Ricardo Delgado, mind you, my bad, by 2 seconds. He finished in 2nd place. David Bush III finished in the 3rd place after a valiant effort to try and get back into P2 towards the end. Felix Felice 4th, a long way back, but leading home a train that included Dale Pedersen and Andrew Ellis, Matt Scherf, Sully Sad, Jay Steffi and Andrew Trickett inside that top 10. And then we look back to the winner in the AM category, Colin McKenzie, P11. Good points for him, but he'll only have about a point or two's worth of an advantage over his competitors, Nick Bruno and Joel Peguero, 2nd and 3rd, and just behind him on the road. Richard Saavedra, P14 in the end. The Californian driver in a somewhat home Grand Prix, finishing in P14 after the spin and the contact with the wall we saw late on. Pete Mejia, Ryan Chandler, Buck Hamilton and Reagan Chandler inside the top 18, with Dave Peterson and Andrew Vernaro running out the top 20. We didn't have too many more drivers on the lead lap, and they are rounded up by Evander Jonesy Fields, Alexander Potvin, Seb Gauthier, Thomas Rep, Herbert Pineda, Ian Southern, and Aaron Sunday, the 27 cars on the lead lap. Then we see a trio of Ferraris round at the top 30 of Kevin Bergqvist, Waldo Walden, and Neil Alexander. We roll on further to see Mark Bray, David Moore, Sean Stecker and Sean Mulholland all a lap down along with Drew DeVers. It was Sean Duhamel and Ian Campana who were also a lap down before we see a couple of the drivers who weren't quite able to finish the race. Jason Park, well, they were able to finish the race, but a long way down. Jason Park 5 laps down, Luke Davis and Dave Jensen 6 down in their McLarens, as there are still more cars. Another McLaren of Jared Deploy 6 laps down after he started on pole position in the AM category. Mark Silvercow was 42nd. Christopher Rhines in his 162nd GT3 start was 40. Jared Keane 8 laps down. Robert Jeffries 9, along with Nikos Sanadakis. Matthew Harms 12 down. Sam Smeltzer 19. Tyler Graff 22. And Clarence Rosa 25. Just the one more car, I do believe, and it's Luis Ortiz 25 laps down. Didn't get very far off of the line, but that was the order in the end here to kick off this season. We'll have a quick word with some of the drivers who were able to get it done. Firstly, with Brett Thurman. Welcome in, Brett. Congratulations on the win. What a way to start off 2025.
Well, I couldn't be happier, and I tell you, the second one is always the hardest one.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 217 race starts for you. It's been a long time coming. You've really grinded it out. But, I mean, the pace you showed today was really impressive. I mean, coming off the back of last season, you didn't have too many headline performances, but this is a really good way to put your name into the fray for the championship.
Well, thank you. It was a great night, and I have my team to thank for getting me ready for tonight.
And, of course, Daytona week coming up next week. Is that a track you're looking forward to?
Yeah, actually, I am. Just hope I don't get confused between the fixed setup and the, our 24 setup. So, not looking forward to detangling that in my mind.
We'll wish you all the best, Brett. Congratulations on the win, and hopefully we'll speak to you again next week.
Thank you. Cheers, gentlemen. Thank you.
It's great to hear from Brett Thurman. P2 man in the end was Ricardo Delgado, and we can have a chat with the number 3 driver now. Welcome in, Ricardo. Congratulations on the P2. That looked pretty hard fought towards the end.
Yes, it was a handful holding up David.
I mean, but give us a quick word on how the pace was throughout the race, because it really looked like you had some great pace in the mid stage of the race, getting closer to Brett before the pit stops. What happened at the pit stop, though? Did you miss the marks ever so slightly?
Yeah, I was too eager to make the stop and just went over the pit stop and had to reverse to it. But, I mean, overall, overlapping for P2 on the pit stop rotation, I say it's a good result. Brett had an awesome pace through the whole race.
It absolutely was, and really gives you a good boost going into next week. Daytona, of course. Is that a track you're looking forward to?
Yeah, it is a good track. Hopefully the Corvette can keep up with those guys, but so far it looks good on the officials.
Good news. We look forward to seeing you there then, Ricardo. 7 days' time, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Ricardo. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we can also have a chat with David Bush III. Welcome in, David. Another podium. You ended last season with a win at Sebring. Not maybe quite the result you were hoping for after the great start, but surely got to be pleased with the podium in the end.
Absolutely. Great way to start the season. Just nice, consistent, needing to survive week 1, and looking forward to the rest of the season now.
And how much confidence does this give you for the rest of the season? Of course, some interesting tracks coming up in the future. Daytona next week, and then we move on towards a couple more classics, Bathurst later on in the season as well. Where do you feel like you are placed in this championship? Do you feel like you can go for the title?
I hope so. A lot of favorites on the schedule this season, so hopefully all the races go as well as this one, and I can continue this run.
We hope you can as well, because it's been great to see, and we'll hopefully speak to you again next week, David, after Daytona, but we wish you all the best, and we might speak to you then.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David. Always great to speak to all of our podium sitters in the Pro Class, and we can have a quick word from our AM winner as well. Colin McKenzie joins us now. Colin, welcome in. Congratulations on the win. That looked pretty hard fought in that AM class.
Yeah, it was definitely a battle. Big shout out to Nick. I mean, the guy just never left. No matter where I was, in front or behind, he was racing solid. It was definitely one of the better AM wins in a while.
Absolutely. And does this give you a good bit of confidence going into the next few rounds of the season? Daytona coming up next week, of course. It looks pretty closely packed in terms of the pace in the AM category, but you're going to be leading the way. Do you feel like you can continue that kind of run?
I hope so. I hope to continue off of last season, and starting the season off hot was extremely well, especially at Long Beach, where I really was just trying to get a result. But yeah, heading into Daytona, we're pretty excited where we're sitting.
Fantastic for you, Colin, and the team. We hope to speak to you again next week, and we wish you all the best when we come to Daytona.
Appreciate it, guys.
Great to speak to Colin McKenzie there after his win in the AM class. But that about wraps us up here for the GT3 Fix Series. Don't go too far. We've got the Sprint Series coming up just around the corner, so maybe get a couple more snacks, and we'll see you in about a minute or two's time. For the second part of our double header of GT3 action here in the PRL, Fix Series is ticked off, Sprint Series is raring to go. We're into qualifying for what should be an enthralling season's worth of action. We had a great end to the year in Season 4 of 2024. At the back end of 2024, of course, Trapani and Therio, the two advanced motorsport drivers, going at it for the title. We may get a few more names near the top to kick us off in 2025. Really looking forward to this one, of course. Myself, Darren Thacker, joined by Ron Morns up in the commentary booth. We've got Hugo Luis pushing the buttons on the broadcast once again. And Ron, 40 minutes on the clock, drivers able to play around with that setup a little bit more. It should mean that drivers kind of finely tune exactly how they want to race these cars.
Yeah, it's the total contrast from the Fix to this race that we've got right now. These drivers going to feel a bit more confident in the way their race cars are driving around a street circuit. That's the sort of environment where you really want to have a car that you're absolutely 100% confident in. It just takes two completely different skill sets. Trying to get a grip to a fixed setup that you don't really have any sort of say in creating, that's pretty difficult. Trying to master a good setup, though, make sure you're confident in the way your race car is driving and the way you're driving around a racetrack as well takes a completely different skill set. So gonna see some expert racing continue as we're in this qualifying session now with only 4 minutes left to go.
43 cars in the session as well, so not quite as huge as we saw in the Fixed series, but still very good turnout. Interesting to note, we have no Vincent Trapanier in the session tonight. He is not here, and his teammate from last season, Simon Therio, after they finished 1-2 in the championship, down in P14 for the time being. So definitely a chance for the likes of Nick Ledecky, Elliot Budzinski, who started the season really well last season, wasn't really able to keep it up, to try and have another go. Jaden Conway, another one of those drivers, looking to go at it from the top. But I mean, you can see how close these gaps are. We had about a quarter of a second, didn't we, for pole in the Fix series a little bit earlier on. A quarter of a second that covers the top 10 in this race, or in this qualifying section, I should say.
Oh yeah, that is absolute pandemonium, and I gotta imagine come time for the race, that is going to convert into an incredible way that race we have coming up is going to finish. Flashing our minds back to that Fixed race we just saw wrap up a couple of moments ago. In that race, the top 20 were separated by about 51 seconds at the checkered flag after 35 minutes of racing action. Here, though, with the Sprint Series, that I have a feeling, even though the race is an extra 5 minutes in length, it is going to be even closer, because I mean, just looking through the gap between Lemus in the number 86 car and Jaden Conwright in the 888, who are now running in third and fourth, as Kevin jumping up to the pole. I was just going to mention the fact that cars running in third and fourth were separated by 0.02 of a second, but a new pole sitter coming out of the blue.
Yeah, really good to see another couple of drivers getting up there. And Kevin Denoyers is right up to the top in the number 5 for the time being. 18.064 is the time. Mind you, we've had a qualifying pole record here that has been held for a very long time of a 16.8, and that was Vince Trapani. I don't think we're going to get close to that, and it will stand. And so Trapani not being here tonight will be pleased that that record will at least continue. But the gaps are so close. Are we going to see a 1 minute 17? I really think that's the question here, with us getting so close, only about 2/3 of a tenth of a second away from it at the time. For the time being, Juan Lemu may have something to say about that in the number 86 car up towards the line. Can he make an improvement? Can he snatch pole right towards the end of the session here? What is the time going to say as he crosses the line? It's going to be not good enough. 19.3 for here. Maybe going for one more lap time to finish off his session, but still more time for drivers to improve on their runs, and really a tenth or two in the top 20 can jump you up the order a heap of positions.
Yeah, that's the thing with this qualifying session. It's always great to see with close qualifying sessions, but it's always funny to wrap my brain around. Let's take a driver like Christian Steenberg, for instance, currently qualified in 6th in the number 77 car. If he were to gain just a half a tenth, he would jump from 6th all the way up to 3rd. So it really speaks volumes about how vacuum sealed together this field is. If a driver like Jason Allen, for instance, in 15th, if he gained a tenth, he would jump all the way up into 13th. So the smallest of gaps that we have in this field really speaks volumes about the talent that we have in this series.
Yeah, basically a tenth for Steenberg gets him up to the front. I mean, 5 positions gained for just that amount of time is absolutely insane, but it just shows how competitive these grids are here in the PRL. Juan Lemu looks like he's going to be going for one more lap time. He's promoting the Mexico City Grand Prix on the side of his car. Let's see if he can fire his way to the top of the order accordingly. Budzinski coming around the final turn now in that almost chrome looking livery. Looks very nice in the new year. What can Budzinski do? Can he improve on the lap time? Not quite. Will stay down in P5 as his session is now over. Nick Ledecky trying to reclaim that pole position. He had it for a little while before Denoyers retook it off him in the number 5, but Ledecky around the final corner, running up to the line, coming into the pit lane. There won't be an improvement there.
Yeah, so not going to improve at the end of this qualifying session. The checkered flag up in the air, and who is going to be the big mover or shaker riding on board with Jaden Conroy in that Triple 8? Let's see, may be able to break that deadlock between themselves and Juan Lemu, could move their way up into 3rd, or will they be able to grab the pole? But it doesn't look like it's going to be enough, though, so remaining in P4, that is going to do it for their qualifying session.
Yeah, no, I'm not too sure how many more improvements we're going to be able to see. Guillaume Levesque is one of those drivers who may improve, but he's just going to be a tenth off of his previous personal best time. Mark Elliott's in the number 823 towards the back of the order for the time being, in 40th position. Can he jump up the order with his final run? You'd think he can. He's only 1.2 seconds off and he goes to P35, but that's just how close it is in this qualifying session. Simon Terrio, P2 in the championship last year, looking to go one better this season. Can he improve on the lap time? The answer is going to be no. He'll stay down in P12 as the checkered flag does wave, and it looks like that is going to be it for all of our drivers. No more improvements in the offing here at Long Beach, and it's going to be Kevin Denoyers who takes pole position by 0.02 of a second, and a blink of an eye quite literally covers the top 4.
Yeah, that is absolute insanity. Sports car racing, usually the closest form of racing you can get, not just on iRacing, but in real life as well. And the qualifying results from that session just absolutely put that puts it in the dictionary, really. Looking through that qualifying session, of course, Denoyers setting that pole at a 118.0. However, looking through the times that we had up and down the grid, you have to go all the way back down to 41st to find a driver who set a time outside of the 1 minute teens. So just absolute insanity in that qualifying session, with a whole field covered by less than 4 seconds. Pure madness, but incredible to see.
Absolutely, and we'll be able to run you through the grid in a couple of minutes' time, but we first have the pleasure of being able to see the pole lap time from Kevin Denoyers in the number 5 car. He's got a little bit of traffic in front of him. Some very smooth lines being taken through the fountain section, and I think being able to tweak the setup a bit to your liking really does help in that regard, doesn't it? Because drivers can just try and smooth out any kind of problems that you face with a fixed setup.
Yeah, it is so important to have that liberty to be able to do whatever you want. Change the tire pressures, change the downforce, change whatever you want. A modern race car, it's like a blank canvas, and you can paint on it whatever you want. And these racers certainly trying to work at with the brush or throw the brush at the canvas. Usually that's what I do when it comes to trying to make a setup on iRacing. But these drivers looking to get the maximum amount of performance that they can, and the maximum level of comfort too. Usually think, oh yeah, setup's really important to try and get the most amount of speed that you can, but I kind of mentioned this in reference to the dilemma between a fixed setup race and a open setup race. Being able to have a setup for your car and for your driving style that you just find to be a lot more comfortable to bring to the ragged edge of control is so important, and these drivers looking to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, and clearly there's not much to really split how much of an advantage they're going to have over the course of this race after how close that qualifying session was, and it is great to see how close in the new year the championships look like they are going to be for us here on a Tuesday night on RaceSpotTV. Delighted to have everybody's company in the YouTube chat. It's always great to see everybody chatting along, getting involved as well, and it's nice to see so many of you on the broadcast as well. So we welcome you in on the Tuesday nights. Hope you've had a lovely Tuesday. We're nearly halfway through the week and getting towards the back end, getting back to, we're getting back into the work balance, aren't we, after the holiday season? But hey, PRL's back. That'll cheer us all up, hey? So we'll be seeing how we get through the end of the week tomorrow night in the Truck Series here on RaceSpotTV, Thursday night in the GTP GT3 Series, and you won't want to miss those when we get back to the IndyCar Series on Sunday night. So a lot to look forward to in the PRL. Drivers in warm-up for the time being, and as we mentioned before, Ron, this is always a good chance for drivers to get their eye in with some higher fuel loads.
Yeah, get some time with that heavier car that they'll have to deal with come time for the race, and also just get more of an opportunity to get some time around this racetrack and deal with the traffic as well. Having a battle with cars side by side is certainly going to have a slightly different connotation come time for the race, because battling for position out there on the track in a warm-up session is entirely different compared to battling for position in a race where the points are being given out. But it's still good to have a little bit of extra seat time, get a chance to get a good read on your competitors as well. It's important to have confidence in your race car, but it's also really good to have confidence that the driver you're going side by side with is going to treat you clean and fair.
And there's Miguel Angel Fonesca with his driver cam on. He's got his microphone right in front, maybe putting himself on the broadcast, maybe just having a good time with friends on the call. His BPM is not that high, actually. A peak of 132, I'd say, is quite low. We'll have to see if that goes up on the race start, but always good to see the drivers trying to add these little features to their own little broadcasts, and then they give us that information going into the race. So always great to see, and great to have more driver cams here in the Sprint Series here in the GT3. It's ticking down then in this warm-up session. I think it's going to be difficult to call this one in this race, with the qualifying gaps being so close. You don't really know exactly where to look, and the race start could really shake things up.
Yeah, that is going to be a real important part of this race that we have coming up. A lot of stuff that's going to be riding on these drivers' minds. The pit stops saw that really affect the fixed race that we had earlier on. Got to worry about that. Got to worry about your competitors. The strategy content for one of these races is oh so critical, because it doesn't just rely on the stuff going down pit lane. You have to think about what's going on in terms of when to attack, when to really push. And one thing that should be noted as well, I'm not sure if you've been noticing this, Dara, a little bit of spray coming off the back of these tires. The track's certainly not wet, but it's not bone dry either, so that could be another factor in this race we have coming up.
Yeah, 3% chance of rain coming into this race, and I think we had a little bit of that in practice at least, so definitely something to look out for. Here's the grid, though, for the race upcoming, and it's Kevin Denoy who will lead us to grid ahead of Nick Ledecky. These gaps are going to be close all the way through. Juan Lemus is third ahead of Jaden Conwright in in P4, I should say. Elliot Bazinski is fifth ahead of Christian Steenber, who rounds out row 3. Corbin Lenaway and Nicolas Lopez Gonzalez on row 4. Baldo Diaz and Guillaume Levesque on row 5. Matt Stadniuk and Simon Terrio on row number 6. We'll roll on to see Chris Beats and Mr. Alawi on row 7. These guys still really close to the leading gap. Miguel Angel Finesca in P15 ahead of Jason Allen in P16. Gonzalo Cortez and Peter Nodwell are on row number 9 within half a second of the pole time, as was Blake Ziti in the AM class with a very good looking margin to some others in that class in P19. Nicholas Mazza is in P20 ahead of Emmett Lingfist and Steve Baker. Kevin Simpson and Alex De Almeida on rows 11 and 12. We'll see David Mendonca and William Fenton. Marc-Andre Garon and Noah Anderson inside the top 28. Alex Carver and Sean Carmody round out our top 30. Kevin Kynitz and Dino Vela, Chris Stewart and Joshua Spears, Mike Elliott and Ethan Bass are the top 36, and what Ethan Bass is doing up in the UK at this time. Jermaine Warren in P37, Devin Brock in P38, Gavin Ammerman and Marshall Scare are on row 20 with Marc-Andre Desjardins and Justin Welsh inside the top 42, and Adam Henwood in the 777 will round out our 43 car field. We're on to the onto the formation lap then here at Long Beach. 43 cars, gaps really nowhere to be spoken of, particularly in the top half of the field. But it'll be interesting to see, I think, in the AM class, particularly how those guys get away. And Blake Ziti with a very nice advantage over anybody else. He's in P19. The next driver down in the AM class is starting at P31.
I think the problem is when it comes to something like that is it can occasionally mess with your head if you have a big cushion. It's like going skydiving, for instance. You've got that reserve parachute. However, you certainly hope that the main parachute really works. So you don't want to rely on that cushion too much. Otherwise, if some sort of moment would happen later on into the race, you're going to find yourself in a little bit of trouble. So despite having a big cushion early on, certainly don't want to use it as we're coming to the green.
Here we go then. A couple of the drivers trying to go 2 by 2. They won't get too many deep for that as we get racing. Good launch, it seems, from our pole sitter Kevin Denoyers as we have 40 minutes on the clock. He will get away cleanly in the lead of the race here. It'll be down to Nick Ledecky and Juan Lemus. If they're going to battle it out as they work their way towards turn number 1, they'll make their way through that slight spray, as he mentioned just a minute ago, and it will be Denoyers who leads them into turn 1. Not too many side-by-side moments as they make their way into the fountain section, which is good to see. But in the background, I think in the battle for about P12, P13, we're seeing a bit of a move to the inside. Nicely done and cleanly done. That's the important thing here at Long Beach.
Yeah, the racers still negotiating this first lap, but they're doing so in a very clean manner. Well done to them. About to head their way into turn number 6, though, side by side, battling for the lead. Look at this pure bravery, trying to make a move done around the outside through turn number 6, 7, and 8 there a couple of moments ago. That could have ended in tears if those two racers were a bit more aggressive, but getting some moves done and trying to get some moves done and making through this first lap very clean. Saw some drama in the fixed race earlier on, heading through the found section and also heading through the really tricky right-hander of turn number 5. But these racers still getting through clean, and they're certainly feeling racy, though. They nearly went 3 wide, hang off into turn number 9.
Field spread still closer than it was in the fixed series, with almost everybody covered by about 25 seconds. So really nice to see how close the battles are. And even down at the final corner, it's not as much of a car park as we saw in the fixed series. Still a couple of drivers having to come to a complete stop, but really not as bad as I think many of us have seen before. Down into turn 1 for the second time then. Battle for P3 and 4 ongoing. Looked like Jaden Conwright may look for a move, but nothing in the offing there for him. Juan Lemus trying to attack for the P2 because Nick Ledecky wasn't quite able to get that lead. And in the close quarter racing that we have here in the sprint series, if you're not going to be able to make a move in front, you're going to then have to be looking in your rearview mirror because drivers behind are equally keen to make the moves on you.
Yeah, that is a big thing. You want to psych your competitors out as best as you can and be like, hey, you don't want to go for a move on me. Try and position your car as best as you can. Don't need to drive a GT3 car that's going to take up the entire width of the racetrack. But if you tackle this racetrack smart, you can avoid just about any sort of side-by-side racing if you position your car in the right way. Around this track, counting through, I would say the main overtaking opportunity is probably turn number 1, turn number 6, turn 8 and 9 possibly, and that's really about it. Some of those corners, getting some moves done, you have to be a little bit brave and certainly have to be bold to try and go for a move like that. So if you just put on good defensive drive and tackle this race with a little bit of a out-of-the-box approach, you can just hold on to that spot. Maybe create a little bit of train behind you, but still, if you're holding on to that spot, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, holding on to the spot is what Gonzalo Cortez is looking to do for P17, but also looking to go for P16 inside line. He's going to get that one done, and the number 9 driver has promoted himself up onto, not the rolling tower, onto the fixed tower. So we'll see where he is and how we can track his progress now a little bit better. Jason Allen it was who he displaced in P16. Uthman Alawi is the driver up the road for the number 9 driver in the 444. May start to find that Gonzalo Cortez gets a little bit bigger in the rear view mirror in the coming sector or two. Still a long way to go in this race, but it's nice to see that we've barely had an incident. We've got William Fenson, who looks like he's toe to pit road, maybe out of the race already, but with the exception of him, everybody in the field, all 41 drivers, still covered by 31.5 seconds.
Yeah, it is absolute insanity and speaks to the volume of these racers in this field who are confident in their chances, confident in the drivers that they are, and confident in the race cars that they're wheeling around this circuit. It takes a whole lot of bravery to be that close and go side by side and battle and dice and claw for every single position that you can. These racers, though, they're going for some aggressive moves. Don't get it twisted. These racers aren't taking it easy by any means as they're going side by side in many corners, many places where I don't think I would have the talent to go side by side through there without ending in some sort of disaster. These race car drivers, they've got the talent, they've got the guts, and they've got the confidence to try and get some moves done. Following Jason Allen, running in 17th at the moment in the number 71 car, he may try and size up a move on Gonzalo Cortez in the number 9 right in front of him in the not too distant future.
Yeah, let's see if Allen can retake that position for P16. He's got Peter Nodwell just behind him, who looks pretty keen as well, so going to have to be aware. P13 and 14, though, finding out. That's Simon Terrio under pressure from Miguel Angel Foniesca. I wonder if his heart rate started to go up a little bit in this battle. Around the outside is a difficult place to go at turn 8, and he's not going to fight that one too hard. Doesn't want to find himself eating the wall, as we saw a couple of drivers do in the fixed series. Now he's got Uthman Alawi right on his tail to try and pick up the pieces from the little moment. Inside line again, though, for Finesca. He's going to go back down the inside. He's going to make that move work into turn line. Very nicely done by the 413. And Therio immediately under pressure once again. Uthman Alawi says thank you very much and makes it 2 for the price of 1. Gonzalo Cortez looking to make it 3. And Therio getting pushed back again and again and again.
That was pure unbridled bravery from Gonzalo Cortez. Doesn't really work out as Terrio gets a move done again. Heading down that start-finish straightaway, but still not going to be enough maybe as Gonzalo Cortez in that number 9 still within striking distance of that 89 Porsche right in front of him, side by side through the braking zone into turn number 1. And look at that bravery in the brakes from Gonzalo Cortez to slip his way up into 15th house textbook, but that was still gutsy.
Yeah, I'm really impressed for Gonzalo Cortez. I think Simon Terrio will be licking his wounds a touch. Of course, as I mentioned, P2 he was in the championship last season, but he's not really able to replicate that kind of pace so far. Still a very long way to go as we see Miguel there. Heart rate it's up to about 125. I saw it. I think that's more where we'd expect it to be. It's fair to say, but he made the move on Guillaume Levesque, and Uthman Alawi is just using the moves that Miguel is pulling off to his advantage. That's the second time that he has made a move immediately after Miguel has, and Guillaume Levesque is facing the same fate as Simon Terrio. Those two are running, I believe, 12th and 13th now, 15th and 16th in the space of about a lap and a half.
Yeah, it's something that we've seen a lot thus far in this race, and I have a feeling these two are not going to be isolated cases in terms of a driver getting one move put on them and that just snowballs out of control to the point where they're dropping down like an anvil dropped out of a helicopter. So these racers trying to stop the bleeding whenever something like that goes on. You want to try and slip your way back up into a spot, stop the train of cars just overtaking you and blowing your doors off as if you have a motor from a microwave in your race car. We've seen it twice thus far. I have a feeling, though, Dara, it's not going to be two isolated cases. I think that may be a general theme throughout this race.
I think so as well. I think it's going to be a very tightly packed race. I don't think you're going to have too much room to maneuver yourself. And I think the pit stop strategies are going to be really, really important. When the margins are so fine, if you get it wrong and you lose a couple of seconds, that's you down 4, 5, maybe even 6 positions, depending on where you are in the train. So it's going to be critical to absolutely nail every element of this race. And I think that's what Kevin Denoyes is hoping to do from the front. The only issue is Nick Ledecky is trying to change that fact. Right on the tail, they'll go across the line once again to start what will be lap number 6 here at Long Beach, and it looks like Kevin Denoyes is going to have to be doing quite a bit of defending because Ledecky all over the rear end, but he's not quite close enough to go for a move into that opening braking zone.
Yeah, not close enough, but we've still got a whole lot of time left to go in this race. Think of the amount of action that we've had thus far, Dara, and also think of the fact that we're not even 8.5 minutes into this 40-minute long race. I've seen a lot of side-by-side battling. Still going to see a lot of side-by-side battling between now and the checkered flag. One thing we saw in that fixed race, which we're not seeing here in the sprint, is a leader checking out. Denoyer has not been able to shake off the challenge from Ledecky. Still about 3.5 tenths of a second between those two, with already a lot of laps on the board. Look at Lemieux, though. He may be within striking distance, has a bit of a gap between himself and Ledecky, but if those two at the front begin to battle, we could see that pack right behind close up and turn this into a 5-car fight for the lead.
It really is an interesting dynamic at the front of the field at the moment in this race, because we've got Kevin Denoyes, who I believe has no GT3 wins in the PRL. We've got Nick Ledecky with 1, and Juan Lemus, who I believe also doesn't have any. So a really interesting dynamic at the front of the race with a few drivers who haven't necessarily been here in the PRL very often in these positions, but they're going to have to try and scrap it away from the win. We've got a couple of drivers here who have been so consistent in years gone by. Guillaume Levesque has got 7 wins in GT3s alone in the PRL. He's down, of course, towards the back end of the top 15, but he's still kicking around. We'll see what he can do, but there's no shortage of talent in this field, but really interesting to see that we might have some fresh blood and some new names to top the order tonight.
Yeah, really nice to see some new racers coming into the series and challenging the old guard. You know, having a consistent cast of characters, having those veteran stars in a series is always good to see. But I don't know about you, Dara, but every single time we get to a new era of insert in real life racing series here, where there's a changing of the guard, the veteran drivers begin to drop back a little bit, and the newcomers, the drivers who had only made their debut in the series a matter of probably about 5 to 7 years before then, when they start to challenge for those wins. That's always an intriguing era of a certain motorsport series to follow, and even in the sim world, that stuff can happen, and we're seeing that develop right now as drivers who we haven't seen in the past making their series debut and making their mark in the process.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these guys who focus their efforts on the GT3s, the records in the GT3s will reflect on their overall record. So not many PRL wins between a few of the front runners tonight, which is great to see that we've got some new names to talk about. Guillaume Levesque, he's been around quite a while, as you would expect with his 7 GT3 wins, fighting with Jason Allen over P15, and Allen just about going to get the better of the 7-time GT3 PRL winner and get himself up into the top 15. Nicolas Mazza in the number 3 driver. I have family who are called Mazza, but he is trying to get himself up into the top 16 and doing a pretty good job in getting quite close.
Yeah, still keeping distance, and at the end of the day, that's all you gotta do. Just make sure you give yourself a chance. That's the best thing you can do in a race like this, and keep that gap as marginal as it can. You don't want to be bump drafting around this racetrack, though. Don't think there's any cars where that would be the good strategy to try and befold around Long Beach. But Nodewell doing what he needs to do at this point in time, running in 19th in that number 73 car, and just keeping tabs at the moment with his competitors. That's the best thing you can do. Set yourself up to be there at the line and get a move done heading off into turn number 9. Well done.
Yeah, nicely done from the number 73, Peter Nodwell, who is just getting towards the cusp of being inside that top 16. Nicolas Massa standing between himself and a chance at that top 16. And Guillaume Levesque, I think, is going to be coming under a little bit of pressure from Massa in the not-too-distant future. Still 27 minutes on the clock, nearly 28. Pit stop still to be had, and a long way still to run at a circuit like Long Beach, where you've got to be focusing in every single lap. You cannot afford to lose any kind of concentration. The walls are so close, the margins are so thin, and for a lot of these guys, they are absolutely threading the needle for the time being, and going to have to be doing that for the remainder of the race. Gap still close though, and it is good to see that the top 11 still covered by less than 10 seconds.
Yeah, that is a ridiculous gap to have, but you know, we saw some very marginal gaps in that qualifying session earlier. What was it at the end of that session with like the top 20 separated by about like 1.1 seconds or something ridiculous like that? We're seeing that same closeness and that same competitiveness continue on into this race. Looking through the drivers we have inside the top 10 right now, I think the biggest gap we have is between Diaz in 9th and Stadnuk in 10th, and that's only about a little under 2 seconds, so it really speaks volumes to how quick these racers are and how confident they're feeling as well. We'll say though, Dara, I think this race has definitely settled into a groove, but I'll ask you this. Do you think this race has settled into a groove quicker than the fixed series does, or do you think this has been a bit more of a on-edge start for these drivers in the sprint series?
No, I definitely think it's been, we've settled in quicker. I mean, only after the first couple of laps did we see drivers start to really kind of get themselves dialed in and into the rhythm. So I really think we settled in quite early on, especially considering the fact that we had barely any incidents off of the start. This is Kevin Kienitz's view of the battle up in front, and he's in P26 for the time being, but he wouldn't mind trying to get around this battle involving Sean Carmody and Chris Stewart, two pro drivers going at it in front of him. Mind you, Kevin is P2 in the AM class. Blake ZT still inside that top 20, but at that advantage being reduced. He had 12, well, I think it was 11 cars between himself and his closest rival in the AM category off the start. That's now down to 4. Kevin's got a little bit more work to do. Still only about 6 seconds off the back of the AM leader.
And you can see this replay of the moment involving Peter Nodewell in that number 73 car. The absolutely awful wait. Whenever this happens in a race that I'm covering, Dara, it is so... It feels like my bones are soaking in vinegar whenever I see something like that. It is such an odd feeling. It's like an odd feeling of disgust whenever you see a driver have an off-track excursion and have to be stopped by the side of the road for what feels like 1,000 years to actually be able to rejoin the racetrack. Doing so safely, though, so I give credit where credit's due, waiting to make sure there's no unsafe rejoin, but it's still such a bad feeling whenever you see a small mistake snowball for a driver who was running inside the top 10, let's just say, drop down like a rock and find themselves in 40th because of one small mistake heading off into a corner.
Yeah, but at least it's good to see that Peter was waiting. I wasn't going to emerge back onto the racing circuit and impede anybody else, as some people like to do, as they make their way onto the freeway. So nice to see that kind of restraint from Peter there, and the respect that he's showing the rest of the competitors. This is always what we love to see here at the PRL, even though he was not having the best of moments for himself. 24 minutes still to go in this race, and battles galore. This is the battle for P21 and P22. This is the leader in the AM category, Blake ZT, who is continuing on in the number 50 car, and he will come under a little bit of pressure from the driver behind, who is, of course, Noah Anderson in the 27, but he's clearly doing a good job for the time being, and clearly at the front of the AM, and he's going to be the one to beat, it seems, early on in this season. It's always interesting when you have those drivers that have a target on their back pretty early on, and his pole time in the AM category really did set a marker down that I think are going to make some of the others in the category sit up and have a look.
Yeah, that lap time was absolutely absurd to his competitors. So, could be a matter of just the racetrack that we're running at to kick this season off, but that is still a crushing advantage in that qualifying section. As we convert too much, though, in this race, you mentioned had that cushion had gone from, what was it, 11 cars at the start to now only 4. I kind of warned about that before you grabbed the green Dara about the fact you don't want to use up that cushion too early on. We're not even at the halfway mark of this race, and I would say, for lack of a better term, that cushion has been just about used. Four cars, though, still a cushion, but not as cushy as one that he had at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being a little bit it's being threatened a little bit more. It's definitely fair to say that, and I think he will be wary of that and will know exactly what he needs to do to try and keep himself right up in contention. It's not been a good race for Simon Terrio. He's going to get overtaken again here, it seems, by our leader in the AMS. I wonder if there's any damage on that Advanced Motorsports car, because he just doesn't look like he's particularly comfortable. Oh, bit of a mistake, though, for our AM leader coming through the penultimate corner. So not too comfortable for the 50, but Blake Ziti's going to have another go at Simon Terrio. I don't really know what happened there. Almost looked like he got offline and gave the position back almost, but Therio back inside the top 20. All of this battling, though, is going to allow some of the other runners in the AM category to get closer to the leader.
Is slowly but surely reeling him in, making that progress, and it is going to be an uneasy feeling come time for the end of this race. One thing we haven't mentioned, though, Dara, is the prospect of the pit stops rearing their ugly, for lack of a better term, head. Well, some drivers may find it ugly, others may find it beautiful to try and make up some time through the pit stops, but they will be coming up in the not too far off future now that we are slowly but surely approaching that halfway mark. And I'm curious, who's going to be that first driver to bite that bullet and make that call to come into the pits? Is it going to be a driver involved in a battle? Is it going to be a driver who's dropped back a little bit? That remains to be determined. Either way, it's going to be vital as to how some of these drivers are going to be doing at the checkered flag.
And we are approaching half distance, so drivers are going to have to be thinking about that checkered flag a little bit more than they were about 10 minutes ago. They're also going to have to be thinking about any kind of pit stop strategies in this race. Rinse and repeat for the move down at turn 9 for our leading AM driver, and for Simon Terrio, it is just a world of pain. He's lost 1, 2, 3. Is that going to be 4? It very well maybe on the exit. Indeed, it will be for Terrio this time. Oh no, though, spin in the background. You can just about see through the final corner. That's Jaden Conrad coming into the pit lane, as many start to do, but there was a spin down there in the AM category. We just about caught the end of it. I'm not too sure who that was, but I'm sure we're going to see a replay of that one.
Yeah, that looked like a big amount of drama, and a spin heading through the hairpin, you usually think, okay, it's a spin, no harm, no foul. No, a spin heading through the hairpin, that could result in a track-blocking pileup if those drivers don't exercise that corner with a whole lot of caution. So something like that could end in tears for many race car drivers, and not just the one who ended up with tires in the shape of rectangles because of a spin. So maybe we're going to have to load up that replay, but drivers making that call to come down into the pits. I mean, 40-minute long race, you'd think, okay, got to come into the pits, may as well do it at the exact halfway mark. Those drivers getting pretty close, as Jane Conrad going to join them in the Triple 8 car, coming into the pits from 6th.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that everybody now is making their way. I think we're going to be seeing everybody making their way into the pit lane in the coming few minutes. Conrad, though, will drop right the way down the order as we see a lot of the mid-pack work their way through. Kevin Denoy, though, still out on the circuit, and he's got a little bit of traffic to work with, so not looking too comfortable for him for the time being, but we'll see how he negotiates. This is Ethan Bass. He was the one that came into contact with the driver that went around, but it was one of the AM drivers. Both cars ended up coming into the pit lane, but Ethan Bass, very difficult to turn the car any more than he was, and I think the contact was one of the slowest bits of contact I've seen on RaceSpotTV even.
Yeah, possibly. I certainly wouldn't rule that out. A little bit of contact going about 2 miles an hour, but look at that, a near disaster heading down into turn number 9. That could have ended in tears for a lap car that Kevin Denoyer was trying to deal with. Denoyer still running in the lead, but you got Nick Ledecky right behind those two cars, separated by less than a quarter of a second, coming out of that final corner. Now over halfway into this race, and I mentioned it earlier on, the fact that in the fixed setup race, we saw a leader, I wouldn't say completely check out, but certainly built up a comfortable gap come time for the pit stops and come time for the end of this race. Not really seeing this from De Nooijer in the 5 car, as Ledecky has gone stride for stride with him thus far.
Yeah, it really has been a heavily competitive race right at the front of the field, and Nick Ledecky has been marking Kevin De Nooijer all the way through this race, and I'm sure we'll be doing as we get towards their pit stops. As we run our way through at turn 6, he's just about stuck behind the driver currently down in P35, and that will be Ethan Bass, who was one of the drivers that got caught up in that incident. Bass gets out of the way, though, nicely lets through the leading drivers as Juan Lamoose and Elliot Budzinski start to fight over P3 and 4. Christian Steenberg is involved in this as well, and this is getting a little bit frantic and a little bit fraught as we get towards the pit stops. Budzinski trying to dummy, going to the inside, late move from Lamoose, and I think he's outbroken himself. No, he's not, or he may have just about done. They're just about going to go side by side through turn 10. Inside line will favour Budzinski at the final turn if he's brave enough to stick it up the inside there, which he won't be able to. There's a little bit of contact though. And Lamoose goes a little bit spinning off the front end. Is anybody coming in? I think Lamoose may have thought about it, but he can't. Budzinski's on the inside. He'll take P3 with the number 91, but this is some frantic action as we get towards the second half of this race.
And it's still not over yet between these two racers. More contact being made heading down into turn number 1 through the braking zone side by side. Heading into the first quarter, Lamoose going to get that move done to slip his way up into the podium positions. But there was about 16 moments there in the span of about 10 seconds there where that could have ended in absolute disaster. It's brought some more cars into that fight, mainly Christian Steenberg in the 77. Those cars now covered by practically nothing for those final positions in the top 5 and the final spots on the podium. So this is going to be a heads-up fight, but two Acuras banging doors heading down that start-finish straightaway. These drivers breaking those elbows out and doing so about halfway through the first race of the season. If that's a sign of things to come from this season, I feel bad for some of these teams' fabricators.
Yeah, it's going to be quite some 9 rounds of racing here on a Tuesday night in the GT3 Sprint Series, and we are by no means completed with the race that we've had so far tonight. Still so much to decide, but with this battling ongoing between Lamoose and Budzinski, they have dropped off a tad. It's fair to say 6 seconds now they got to Nick Ledecky, when that was really at about the 1 second mark before they started battling. Kevin De Nooijer, though, going faster and faster. Still impressive to see him setting the fastest lap of the race last time around, and an 18.4 was one of only 2 drivers in the 1 minute 18's last lap around, showing how much pace he's got at the back end of this stint.
Yeah, these drivers trying to kick on the hyperjets as they're seeing those pit stops approach. I've seen it a whole lot from my experience there. I'm sure you have as well. These racers realizing, okay, I've done everything I need to do in this stint. I've saved enough fuel, maybe possibly, perhaps. I've saved my tires. I've got enough gas left in the tank. I may as well push it and risk it to get some moves done and just gain a little bit of time before I make that run down pit lane. You can see a little bit of wall contact being made as these racers exit turn number 8. Such a challenging corner around this track, but the one that I feel like is the most sketchy and certainly the most important on the subject of pit stops is that pit entry. Really terrifying around this track. It's like threading it's like threading the needle there, for lack of a better term, because these racers have to go through there with full commitment, carrying the speed, but then they need to drop the anchors immediately as they're still turning through that pit entry. Really sketchy stuff that these racers will have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think the drivers are going to be trying to avoid as many of these sketchy moments as they possibly can, but with a couple of the drivers... there's one of them, though. Is that going to be a big incident for... Was it Alex Carver? Yes, it was Alex Carver hitting the wall. I was just saying he may have got into the marbles on the outside of the corner, may have just outbroken himself in the battle with Guillaume Levesque and Kevin Simpson, but he will come into the box. Now, I wonder if there's much damage on that car. Let's see it now from Carver. Must have gone deep going for a move. Far too late on the brakes. Absolutely no chance of making that corner. And the rear end stepping out and sliding around, and he lost the 2 positions that he gained on the brakes.
Yeah, gotta take a look at this. Carver just outbraking himself horribly, heading off into turn number 9. And that was a big pancake impact into that outside barrier there, Dara. So that's gonna put a pretty big amount of damage on that race car. It is not going to be feeling like a smooth ride at all for Carver between now and the checkered flag. Thankfully for him, though, it happens in the second half with less than 15 minutes on the clock. That's still not going to be a good ride at all. That was a big amount of wall contact. Going into that corner, probably about 10 to 15 miles an hour too fast, carrying that speed, and it's going to end in tears.
Yeah, and that's not something I think we want to be seeing. Anything ending in, particularly at this stage of the race with only 30 minutes on the clock, and drivers who've worked so hard to get to the positions that they are in. It would be gutting for them to lose anything from here. Maybe an inside move from Chris Stewart on Blake ZT as we go down in towards turn number 9. Nothing really going then. Going to have to be careful because there's more drivers behind willing to pick up the pieces, but around the outside, that'd be bold, that'd be brave. If you can get it to the inside at the final turn, Blake giving as much room as he can on the inside, and the move completed. 2 for the price of 1 for ZT as well. Well, in a reverse manner, he's lost 2 positions, but a very good move for Chris Stewart. Corbin Lenaway following him through, very smartly done.
Yeah, that was a smart move. These drivers exercising some patience and trying to think of the good times to get these moves done. And that was very, very slick. Well held from both of those racers to go side by side and have it not end in any sort of major disaster and just a simple swap-a-roo of positions. Looking through the field, though, we've got battles up and down, and at the moment, the front 15 are separated by 36.5 seconds after well over 28 minutes, well, a tick under 28 minutes of racing action. Well over 20 for sure. You can tell I was great at math class as a kid, but this is still a fantastic fight that we've got going on all throughout this field as Gonzalo Cortez nearly comes to blows with the 444 in front of him heading into the braking zone of the hairpin.
Yeah, and luckily for Uthman Alawi, there's been no contact down there. Gonzalo Cortez still trying to get himself inside that top 10. 12 minutes to do so, and we'll have to see if he can pop himself up there this time around. Not too many laps left on the counter. We've completed, I believe, nearing, I think nearly 20 now. Yeah, 21 laps completed. We should have 10 more to go, including this one. And Kevin Denoise is going to be praying that those 10 laps are completed as fast as he possibly can. He's had Nick Ledecky on his tail all the way through this race. We're nearing on half an hour completed, and it's just not going to be a comfortable time up there in the lead, is it?
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be having a less than half a second gap between yourself and Ledecky. Both those racers, all of these racers at the start, really turning into just those two. Really want to grab the first checkered flag of the season. You want to start off the season on the right foot, because if you twist your ankle in the first step, you're not going to have a good walk for the rest of the season. So these racers certainly going to be risking it in some side-by-side racing, heading through turn number 9. That was incredibly close between the 444 of Alawi and Gonzalo Cortez in the 9. That was incredibly tense between those two a couple of moments ago.
Yeah, luckily again managing to avoid each other, but it is getting close between these two in their battle for P10 as the sun starts to set, not just on the circuit but on the race. These guys are going to be battling it right the way to the end, and Alawi, I'm sure, not going to be allowing Cortez any kind of gap in his attempts to make this move as they go through the fountain. You're not going to see a send there. I think the next place we may see a send from Cortez may be down at turn 9.
Yeah, it seems like turn number 9 proving to be a good overtaking opportunity for these drivers. One of the heaviest braking zones around this track, but you need to get a move done through there with authority, because you don't want to be side by side heading through the long, seemingly never-ending left-handed sweeper of turn number 10, and certainly don't want to be side by side heading into the hairpin. We've already seen that thus far in this race, Dara, and that usually ends in some sort of disaster. But turn 9 proving to be a good overtaking opportunity. Let's see if Cortez will be able to get that move done to slip his way up into the top 10. Not going to be close enough to go for the dive into the corner, but maybe trying to size it up in the not too far off future. We saw him test his what he dipped his toes in not terribly long ago, as they went side by side 1 lap ago, I believe. So who knows, maybe he's just trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to stick against that wall, and then have a last lap challenge on Alawi for that final spot in the top 10.
It is interesting, though. I think with Cortez in or outside of that top 10, that still works. That the highest positioned driver running in the top 10 right now from the championship last season was Elliot Budzinski, who finished P16 in the championship. I don't believe anybody who was in the top 15 in the championship last year, looking down those, no, there wasn't anybody inside the top 15 of the championship, are inside the top 10 of this race right now. Jason Allen in 12th was in 7th place last season, so he would change that stat if he was to get inside the top 10. But really incredible to see almost a changing of the guard from the back end of 2024 into the new year of 2025, and Kevin Denoy is leading that charge. Nick Ledecky had a lot of near misses last season, was right up running at the front a couple of times, but wasn't able to finalise those results. I didn't even get a top 5 last season, so this will be the first of his coming into 2025, but I think he's looking for a first win of the year, it's fair to say.
Yeah, looking to grab the first checkered flag of this season, and if he did it, he would have to undercome a lot of pressure. So Denoyers at this point in time, he's been giving him a hard fight. These two have been going quick all throughout this race, running in P1 and P2 throughout a decent chunk of this race thus far. So Ledecky, if he is able to get that move done to move in front of Denoyer and take the win to kick this season off, that would be an incredibly satisfying result for the driver of the number 16 car. Seeing Diaz come down pit lane. He's not alone, though, as Juan Lamoose has come into the pits in the number 86. He was running, I believe, in 3rd at the time, so that is going to be the first driver we see who's a real contender in this race make that run to come down pit lane. I'm curious as to whether or not Denoyer and Ledecky are going to follow. I'm curious as well, Dara, if we're going to see a repeat of what we saw in the fixed race earlier on and see the battle up towards the front of the field get decided because of a pit stop error.
Yeah, those little moments can really cost you dear, and for drivers who've been so important or so consistent in their racing so far, to have a little moment like that can be really costly, and hopefully it won't cost too much coming into this race. But as we see Denoyers and Ledecky get towards their box, it's a very long way down this pit lane here at Long Beach, and when you have the front 2 boxes, you'd expect there to be quite a long way. They stop pretty much exactly at the same time, and a short stop for Denoyers, 5.7, a little bit longer for Ledecky of 6.5. Denoyers will keep the lead and will have a little bit more of an advantage as they emerge from the pit lane.
I'm curious, though, how is Ledecky going to take this? Losing a bit of time through the pits is always a bit disheartening, so I'm wondering if Ledecky is going to have that ability to shake off that dust, swipe it away from his shoulders. As speaking of getting swiped, Denoyer nearly getting swiped, heading down into turn number 1. That's a lapped car who came barreling up on Denoyer as he came out of pit lane. That's one thing we haven't mentioned thus far in this broadcast thus far, Dara. The fact that pit exit is terrifying around this racetrack because you're forced to the outside line. You don't want to cut in too much, though, because otherwise you're going to find yourself picking up a pit lane penalty, which is going to be an absolute game ender for these drivers. But Denoyer having a very close call with that encounter with a lapped car. Looking through there, I'm not sure how many more lap traffic encounters Denoyer is going to have to deal with. So if Ledecky wants to close up that now 1.3 second gap between himself and the leader, he's going to have to do it on pace and pace alone, which is a tough ask with only 5.5 minutes left to go.
Yeah, and it was Dino Vela there, the lapped car, who nearly came into contact with the race leader Kevin Denoyers as they worked their way through. But Denoyers really is going for a lights to flag victory here. He hasn't lost the lead all race long, unless I'm forgetting a change for the lead, which I don't believe I am. Nick Ledecky has been selling P2 pretty much all race long, and he didn't lose any positions to the pit stop to the number 5. So this could be, if he can get to the end of the final 5 minutes, I don't want to give him any kind of commentator's curse. If he can get through the next 5 minutes and to the end of the race, it would be a statement victory at the start of the season, and a really impressive way to kick us off in 2025 in the GT3 Sprint Series. But still, a few minutes to go, and every single corner is a challenge here at Long Beach, and the concentration, as we've mentioned, has to be high, and we're going to keep an eye on whether he can get himself to the line. Still a battle for P11, though, in the order, still between Uthman Alawi and Gonzalo Cortez in that battle. Cortez still not able to find a way through. Time really ticking away for him to do so.
Yeah, not a whole lot of time left to go, and not a whole lot of opportunities either. You think, how many laps would you say we have left to go? Probably about 3 or 4. Okay, in those 3 or 4 laps, you've probably got about, I don't know, 8 to 10 separate overtaking opportunities, and even some of those are rather sketchy. In terms of slam dunk fantastic overtaking opportunities, probably about 5 laps. So these racers running out of time and running out of opportunities to be able to get some moves done. This has been an awesome fight to keep our eyes on. It is now for P11, as there's been some shuffling as a result of those rounds of pit stops that we still have going on for some drivers in this race. But it's currently between the racers running in 11th and 12th who've given us a really intriguing fight to sink our teeth into as of recent, running effectively by themselves, as you have to go well farther up the road to find Miguel in the 413 car running in the final spot in the top 10, and then you have to go about a second and a half back to find Emmett Lindquist in the number 42. So these two who we have on screen right now kind of in their own small little bubble in the final 3 minutes of this race, and nearly going side by side through turn number 1.
Yeah, not quite, but Uthman Alwar, that name, I nailed it early on, and now as the time is starting to hit me a little bit, I'm struggling. Uthman Alawi coming through. I will get there eventually. I will, I promise. Gonzalo Cortez still tracking behind him, but he's doing a good job to defend the 444 in the closing stages of this race. Cortez, I'm sure, going to be starting to get a little bit frustrated, and the inability to make the move is going to be, I think, playing on his mind. We may see a send in the closing couple of laps, but I don't suppose we're going to see Emmett Lindquist and Nicholas Massa catch up. The gap is relatively large, considering we've only got a couple of minutes left. This is Corbin Lenaway going for a spin down at the fountain. Contact there with another car, going across the front nose and having a spin, not quite launching himself into the water. We've seen that before, haven't we?
Yeah, we have seen that happen in the past, both in real life and in the sim. Thankfully, no one's taken out the Dolphin in the fountain, which I think would be a real good treat. I think there should be a reward on iRacing if anyone were ever to take out the Dolphin on that fountain here in Long Beach. They do that, I don't know, they get like 100 iRacing credits or something like that, but nevertheless, Lenaway running into some difficulties not terribly long ago. And speaking of not terribly long, we don't have terribly long left to go in this race. This 40-minute race for the opening race here from the GT3 Sprint Series has absolutely blown by, as that going off the circuit is Gonzalo Cortez. That's going to take him out of that fight with Alawi, but Cortez having a big moment. That was coming out of turn number 4, and you can see that front bumper was missing as well. I think it's popped back onto the race car, but either way, going for a spin is a driver of the number 9. Go drop him outside the top 15, and here's what happened here, Dara.
Yeah, and Alawi just getting away up the road, and Cortez maybe losing a tiny bit of concentration, finding himself in the wall and finding himself dropping down the order, promoting Lindquist to P12, promoting Nicholas Massa to P13, and Cortez now just about hanging on to a position in that top 16. We've got 55 seconds left. I think it's pretty close whether we're on the last lap or not. I think we're going to have one more after this, but it is going to be definitely close as they run towards the line. Kevin Denoyer has got a relatively comfortable lead now, 2 seconds. Let's see if he can control this to that checkered flag.
Yeah, will he be able to command the end of this race? Doesn't have a whole lot of time left to go, though. So, actually, I say that I'm not going to commentator's jinx him. He's got about 3 corners left to go until the first checkered flag of the season is his. And Denoya has had a brilliant start to this season, shaking off that challenge from Ledecky in the process. Ledecky having a slightly longer run down pit lane, but outside that, he just never has recovered as that gap has ballooned as of late. But Denoya, only 1 more corner left to go, and the first checkered flag of the season is his.
Here it comes out of the final corner. The timer just about hit 0, and the Team BGZ driver of Kevin Denoyer in the number 5 car takes the checkered flag and takes the opening win in the GT3 Sprint Series for 2025. He'll be the championship leader when we head to Daytona in 7 days' time, and a dominant performance. Really impressive from him to get his first win in the PRL. Nick Ledecky, P2, his first top 5 in a very long time, and Wanle Moose finishing on the podium after a great performance for him. Kind of went under the radar radar in the second half of that race, but a really impressive drive to get himself on the podium. We'll have to look a long way further back. It should be Blake Ziti who comes across the line to win the AM class, but he's got a few more corners to go. He's been able to control that after his good qualifying performance.
Yeah, after a brilliant qualifying performance, we thought things were starting to fall apart for him, but that really has not been the case. Recovering and stopping that fall down the running order, had that big cushion, dropped back a little bit. That cushion got flat, but thankfully he was able to fluff up that pillow again. And it looks like coming out of the final corner, that AM checkered flag, the first one of the season, is going to go the way of the driver of the number 50 car.
And what a result it is for Blake to get his win here at Long Beach to kick off his season in what he hopes will be a championship winning season. I have no doubt. Everybody come across the line. I think a name that we really have to give a shout out to is Guillaume Levesque. The second half of that race was really impressive from Levesque. He was right towards the back end of the top 15 for a while, towards the midway stage, but he managed to recover to the top 6 and really was an impressive display. But in the meantime, here are the results. 30 laps it was here at Long Beach after 40 minutes worth of racing, and in the end, all 30 laps led by one driver, Kevin Denoyer, who was our winner. 2.1 seconds they got back to Nick Ledecky, who had a very good performance to finish in P2, ahead of Juan Lemoux, who finished in P3. I think 3 drivers who haven't been on the podium in a very long time, if at all, in the PRL. Christian Steenborough was 4th, ahead of Elliot Budzinski and Guillaume Levesque after his good recovery through the field in the 991. Abaldo Diaz and Chris Beats finished in 7th and 8th, ahead of Matt Stadniuk and Miguel Angel Fonyeska, who finished inside the top 10. Uthman Alawawi was 11th in the 444, ahead of Emmett Glingfist for Solprec Precision Racing. Nicholas Mazza and Jason Allen were 13th and 14th for SCR, ahead of Alex de Almeida and David Mendonca inside the top 16. Gonzalo Cortez just about missing out on that top 16 after his spin towards the end of the race, with Steve Baker, Kevin Simpson and Chris Stewart rounding out the top 20. Mind you, a word on Steve Baker, because Steve Baker was the champion in the AM category last season, which is why he's a pro this time round. Blake Ziti, though, was the AM winner tonight, and he will take the championship lead over to Daytona. He finished ahead of Sean Carmody, Joshua Spears and Peter Nodwell in the pro class. Mark Elliott was 2nd in the AM class, ahead of Ethan Bass and Devin Brock, who was 3rd in the AM class in P27 overall. Simon Terrio, a night to forget for him, P28 in the end. Dino Baylor and Marshall Scare in the top 30, but a lap down in the end, as was Jermaine Warren and Noah Anderson. Kevin Kynitz and Justin Welsh were 3 laps down. Gavin Amon was 5 laps down, and Corbin Lenaway in P36 6 laps down after he went spinning over at the fountain. Alex Carver 11 laps down, with Nicholas Lopez Gonzalez, Jaden Conwright and Marc-Andre Desjardins in the teens of laps down. Marc-Andre Garon and William Fenson 41st and 42nd, 22 and 27 laps down respectively. Now we can speak hopefully to a couple of our front runners in that race, and not least for Kevin Denoyer. And welcome in, Kevin. Congratulations on the victory. A really impressive display to kick off the year.
Thank you. It was pretty rough. I'm actually really surprised. I didn't think the McLaren would be any good here, because I don't know, it just didn't seem like the car over here. Everyone's running the Acura, which seems to be like the really good car, but surprisingly it seemed to be competitive today.
And I mean, how much were you expecting this coming into tonight? Of course, a little bit of an unknown. The grid, very busy with so many cars on the racetrack. Was you surprised to get pole position? Were you pleased, or did you kind of back yourself from the start?
I was expecting like a good result, but I was surprised to take the pole. That's how I'll put it. There's some really good names in here, and I don't know, I guess luck fell into my hands. Maybe they just got blocked in some coil laps or something, but I feel like I got lucky. But, I'll take it. What happens, happened.
Yeah, and hey, you'll have the championship lead going into Daytona next week. Is that a circuit you're looking forward to racing at?
Yes. It's a fun track. Anything could happen, honestly. Slipstream track. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. But Kevin, congratulations on the win. You'll have the championship lead next week, and hopefully we'll speak to you again then.
Yeah, thank you. See you then.
Great to speak to Kevin after his race victory, and we're going to have a chance to speak to the P2 man, Nick Ledecky. Ron, he's with you now.
Yeah, Nick Ledecky now joining us in the commentary booth. Hello, Nick, and well done on the P2 result here at Long Beach. Just talk us through the race that you just had here tonight.
Pretty frustrating. You're limited on passing zones here, so I spent the whole race sort of catching up closing up the gap and then making a mistake to build the gap back up again. So kind of working against myself, but just frustrating overall. And then I thought I'd be able to get a jump in pits just for the opposite to happen, and he had a bit of a quicker stop than me, so just didn't work out in the end.
It's unfortunate, but he still put up a really good fight and had a fantastic battle all throughout that race. Good way to kick off the season, though, in terms of the pace that you showed. So I'm sure you're pretty confident heading into the next race of the season at Daytona. So what are your thoughts heading into that race in 1 week's time?
I haven't prepped as much as I did for this one. I don't know that I'm going to be doing the 24, so I'm sure there's plenty of guys out there that have really put in some hours there already. So it'll be interesting again. Just it's super competitive in this series, so I don't know how I'll fall into the mix, but hopefully I can get out front again.
Well, fingers crossed, because he gave us a fantastic battle to keep our eyes on for all throughout this race, and what a way to kick off this season in terms of the action we had out there on the racetrack. Now, Nick, I'll ask you one more question before we let you go and get ready for this race at Daytona in 1 week's time. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Yeah, I'd like to, well, first off, thank my parents especially. And then outside of that, thank Elliot Budzinski, Jaden Conwright, and then also Phil Deans, who worked a lot together on the setup this season as well as last. So just shout out to all those guys.
And thank you for joining us in the commentary booth, Nick. Well done on the P2 result. I'm excited to see you back out on the racetrack for the rest of the season.
Thank you.
Great to be able to speak to Nick Ledecky there, and good to hear him after a good performance, which is going to kick him off for 2025 nicely. Finally, we've only got one more driver to talk to, and it will be our AM winner tonight, Blake ZT joins us now. Blake, welcome in. Congratulations on the win. A great qualifying display from you. Were you surprised to have that kind of buffer to the rest of your class?
Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Not really. I mean, I thought that a couple of guys would show up and just, blow us out of the water, as always. But I was happy to see that I was definitely competitive in my class of the amateurs and, kind of up there with the pros, which is always nice to see.
And it really seemed like you had some good pace throughout the race. Is that going to really give you a little bit of confidence going into the next races coming up? Daytona next week, of course.
Yeah, I'll be putting in the laps again as I did this week. I had an issue like T8 lap 4 and I smoked the wall, so I had about 5 minutes of optional repairs as I pit. I was kind of driving with my wheel 90 degrees to the right, so I'm glad I even made it through it, to be honest.
But you got the points on the board, and that is what matters. Daytona is next week. Is it a track you're looking forward to racing out?
Oh yeah, Daytona is always a fun track. You get a lot of those chicanes in there and the bus stops, so it should be interesting.
And I think in about 10 days' time, we'll all know it like the back of our hand, won't we? Yep. So we wish you all the best for that next week, Blake, and hopefully we'll speak to you again.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you.
Great to speak to everybody who'd like an interview, our top two in the pro and our winner in the AM. And Ron, it's been a great evening worth of racing tonight. I think we've seen so much action and so many new names towards the top of these championships that I think can really set us up for some good championships going into the next few weeks.
Oh, it is going to be a brilliant way to kick off 2025. It was a brilliant way to start this season here at Long Beach in both the fixed and the sprint series. Some fantastic battles to keep our eyes on. Some clever racecraft from these drivers as well. Lots of things to keep our eyes out for. A brilliant schedule, a brilliant roster of drivers. All the action and more exclusively here on RaceSpotTV, PRL, and the GT3s. Certainly not disappointing to kick this season off.
Not at all, and we will look forward to Daytona in 7 days' time. It should hopefully be an incredible way to continue our championship. Of course, we're going to Daytona pretty much everywhere, aren't we? Across the iRacing network with the 24 hours coming up next Saturday and Sunday. And of course, you can see that here on RaceSpotTV, along with all of the PRL action that will happen over the course of the next week. Don't forget tomorrow night, the Truck Series. Thursday night, the GTP GT3 Series. But in 7 days' time for the GT3 fixed and sprint series will be at Daytona. It'll be same time, same place here on RaceSpotTV, and we hope to see you there. My thanks for Ron Morns alongside myself, Darren Thacker, up in the commentary box. We've had Hugo Luis making the broadcast, and we hope to see all of you tomorrow in PRL and next week when the GT3 sprint and fixed series returns at Daytona.